Waking up in the morning, she half-heartedly fumbled around the bed before even opening her eyes and realized she was alone. Ben likely having already run off to either play with the archive or work on his magics since he'd finished every book in Viv's library, meaning Thera would be facing the start of the day by herself. Hopefully it would be a good one, but her stomach was in knots thinking about it. Her aunt had said that she'd explain the changes going on in Ben by lunch, and as much as she wanted to know what could have possibly taken the Great Life Spirit so long to figure out, the fact that so much time had passed left her in doubt they'd be receiving any good news. Relax, it will be fine. Viv is probably just absorbed in studying things without even considering the fact that we're worried. I can't exactly expect her to be sympathetic. Still, for as much as she disliked her aunt, she couldn't deny the fact that the visit had been useful. Getting guidance on such complex life spells was a huge benefit, even if she didn't plan on using most of them ever again, and it felt like she was actively improving her magic with each day she was there. Felt good. With that positive frame of mind, she forced herself out of bed to get whatever bit of guidance she still could before it was time to go. As much as she didn't regret stopping there, she wouldn't stay any longer. She missed her aunt and uncle, she missed being home. Making her way through the empty halls, save for the few homunculi that scurried about, fulfilling whatever task was built into them, the first thing she noticed was just how cold it was. In their week there, the building itself had always been a safeguard against the external chill, the heating being perfect, even despite the fact that her aunt had no need for such a thing. And as she tried to ignore it to go to the room she'd been having most of her lessons, she passed the front door, finding it wide open with Vividus standing at its edge. Viv, I'm aware you don't have any flesh to be bothered by this, but most mortals aren't exactly thrilled with the prospect of spending so much time in freezing weather. Don't tell me you're having me fight out there again? Even if it was hands-on training, it was her least favorite of everything her aunt had made her do by far. The cold would bite at her flesh the entire time, distracting her and splitting her focus from everything else. She'd admit that a desire to go back to the warmth was an excellent motivator to push herself and finish as fast as possible, but it was an experience she wouldn't be looking back on fondly. Oh, I'm well aware. There's very few races that prefer this climate, and even the ones that do don't usually come this far north. The day-night cycle can be too hard on them. Still, it has its benefits. It lets me work on plenty without being distracted. Anyway, child, you really should aim to fix this sleeping problem you have. I thought you'd have woken up a while ago, and your pet must be rather cold by now. What? She pushed her way past her aunt to see in horror the scene the Great Life Spirit had set up. When she'd been made to fight for practice, it had been a struggle. A dozen beasts designed to do nothing but kill in a land where there was no earth to pull from, and being powered by their maker to keep her dark magic from having any real effect, giving her no choice but to use her life spells for her attacks. It had been a challenge then, but it was incomparable now. Instead of a dozen, she was seeing 100 standing before her, as if waiting for her to make the first move. Not one of them was natural in appearance. Razor-like claws and jagged teeth on all of them, and snow-white fur to act as camouflage. Each creature towered about her and showed the clearest sign a thing could give that it was properly ensouled instead of just being another group of homunculi. There was a shimmer of mana around them as they prepared for the moment they stopped being restrained to fire off their spells and carry out their violent impulses. Despite the terror of the prospect of fighting them all, though, it was barely a blip in the back of her mind as she focused on the giant behind them, towering over them all, being at least 4 stories tall. Thera couldn't begin to imagine where her aunt had been hiding such a creature. Bipedal like any hominid type, it was covered in a thick, almost sharp-looking fur, as if each strand was really a saber ready to strike, and 4 muscular arms to go with it. She could tell it had some sort of magic to it too, even if she wasn't sure what. But that wasn't the biggest problem. The problem was Ben, trapped in its hand, looking like he was slowly being crushed as his hair filled with frost. His skin would have been pale and blue from the cold if not for the creature's grip squeezing the blood to his head while he was trapped there. "You psychotic bitch!" Thera screamed. "What the hell are you doing?" In the face of her niece's rage, though, the Great Life Spirit was as indifferent as she ever was. "Hopefully motivating you. Your progress is dreadful compared to what it should be, but you've shown that you can at least make some for him. I'd get to it by the way, He's been out there for a while waiting. Her immediate instinct was just to murder her. But as much as she wanted to, Thera knew she couldn't do it. Not from a lack of will or some familial bond, but the knowledge that the difference in power between them was just too great. She'd come here seeking help, but instead she was trapped playing her aunt's game with Ben's life on the line, and no way to use any of the magics at her disposal that might be of any use. Knowing she wouldn't be able to direct any of that rage to the one who deserved it, she pushed past her aunt with her staff in hand, with the creatures before her treating it like a signal to act as they charged forward, each rushing towards her at a speed her legs would never be able to move, with the ice shaking around them as it was pulled from the ground to fire at her. Water affinitied then. With so much happening at once, a part of her wished she had one of Ben's ridiculous mind skills to make things easier on her. Her telekinesis was nowhere near good enough to stop the attacks in midair, but she strained her mana to fire off a pushing effect in front of her, slowing some of them down and knocking others slightly off her path as she followed it up with her life magic, trying to move it in the same way her aunt had to put down any of the creatures she'd been made to experiment with, overstimulating their brains to make them fry. The closest ones went down as a few farther back seemed to feel an effect and she rushed closer. It wasn't a smart choice. As a mage she wasn't meant to be working up close, instead acting from a distance, but life magic was one that saw its true worth in hands-on situations. Otherwise, its effects would weaken and disperse. Her control was too bad to do it from afar, so instead she forced herself closer into the fray, firing the same spell again and again at anything that got too close, watching groups of them fall each time until she heard her aunt's voice. Just doing the same thing over and over again is rather boring, don't you think? You'll never improve like that. So since I'm here, let's increase the challenge. She heard the words as she was standing right in front of one of them, trying to fire the spell and failing. Vividus's overwhelming skill and magic working from a distance that Thera thought she'd never be able to manage herself, perfectly countering the magic she tried to cast and leaving no effect on the creature as it swiped at her, tossing her through the sky as a deep gash formed along her abdomen from its claws. In a flash she was on her feet, pouring all the mana she could into closing the wound as she tried to figure out what she could do in the seconds she had. She had no idea if her aunt was going to block that single way of attacking or just any attack that focused on disrupting the creature's natural function, but that didn't leave her with many options, and the ones she could think of would take too long to cast. With none of that, even considering that she'd made almost no progress getting closer to the beast that held Ben, shaking him in the air and seeming to taunt her. More than anything she wanted to close that distance. But how? My speed's not bad, but getting past all of these would be. That line of thought trailed off as she had an idea. A terrible idea, one she'd have never entertained before for the damage it was sure to do to anyone that she used it on. Buffing. Her mana was so great that there was a far too real fear that doing so would destroy the body of the person she used it on. But having the 9th level of the skill, she was more equipped to do it now than any time in the past, and more importantly, it wouldn't be happening to a Ben or friend or any innocent person. She was going to do it to herself. That quick choice made her muscles and bones flood with her own mana, her body erupting in pain in an instant from the flood as her heart rate felt like it tripled. Through the pain, though, she felt the effect in an instant, the world slowing down around her as she kicked off the ground and began to move. A single step tossed her through the air as she flew past the closest group, the buff giving her enough leeway to think on just what to do as she stepped away from swiping teeth and lunging claws. She was sure she could apply the same buff to them with significantly less care and control than she had to herself, but there was always the fear that the monsters could handle it, or worse, her aunt would help them handle it, so with that in mind she quickly adjusted her strategy. All of her mana went towards strengthening herself and healing all of the damage the buff did to her body, while the staff she was using became more like a club in her hand than anything else as she smashed it against the faces of the creatures she ran by, feeling the strain on her limbs as she struck with more force than her body wanted to give. It wasn't her first time fighting like that. She'd gained the staff wielder skill back when she adventured alone, fighting off anything that got too close before she could use her spell, and even if she'd never specifically trained it, it gave her just enough edge in the form of instinct, striking where her gut told her to and continuing past, trusting she'd done enough to make them fall. There was plenty she hadn't hurt that hadn't been close enough for her to attack in melee combat, but she'd decided she'd go back for them later once Ben was safe. Her priority was the giant standing in front of her. The creature bared its teeth as she got close, seeming to grin and squeeze Ben even tighter as she rushed at it. Knowing that she wouldn't simply be able to beat it with her staff as she'd done for the others, and she rushed forward trying to squeeze out a quick victory in the only way she could think to. She had to assume that her aunt would continue to keep her from trying to overstimulate it with her magic. So she took another option. As much as it was a monster designed to fight and kill, it was still alive. It had bodily functions she could take advantage of in other ways, and seeing a thick vein pulsing in its neck, knew instantly how she wanted to try it. Wielding her life magic, she directed it at the giant with all of the control and focus she could muster, all for one small, simple goal: stimulating cell growth within the creature, forcing the vein to seal and keep blood from flowing to the beast's brain, all to kill it in the end. It was more than doable with the skill she currently had. She knew it was, but she still felt it fail as she fired off the spell, the monster using one of its giant arms to take a swipe at her as it did, throwing her through the air and breaking her ribs, the only thing keeping her alive being her high vitality. "Poor luck," she heard her aunt say from behind her, as if she was watching Thera lose at a game instead of fighting for her life. "But really, Thera, it wasn't a bad idea, but did you think it would be so easy? I created this creature for the purpose of fighting demons. Of course it can shrug off that level of life mana. If you want to save him, you actually need to try to push beyond that." She wanted to scream at her aunt, but did her best not to let herself be distracted as she started to heal her wounds while she moved through the pain, instead doing her best to keep buffing herself and fixing any damage it did to her body, all the while dodging attacks from both the creature that had Ben and the smaller ones behind her. All of them were firing spells now, seeming to want to keep a distance after facing her in action while she could only dodge, lamenting her own weakness. "Vividus is insane. I'm never going to be able to force enough life mana into a spell if it shrugged off that. I have no clue what she expects from me. What am I supposed to even be doing here? Does she have even the slightest idea on how I might kill this thing? Or did she really just decide to make it impossible and see if I was good enough to figure it out anyway? Hell, what options do I even have?" Eventually she'd have to stop running, but she couldn't fight it head-on like she had with the other ones, and it felt like her magic was useless. She couldn't resorting to any dark spell if Viv was just going to negate their effects like when they practiced, but she'd reached the limits of what her life magic could manage, and Earth was never an option to begin with in that land of snow and ice. But for some reason, despite how sure she was that that was the case, she felt herself hesitate to abandon the idea of using that magic altogether, like there was something picking at the back of her mind. A single spell she'd never tried but just might have been able to help as it came to her, and throwing safety to the wind she rushed to the giant again, trying to gather all of the mana within herself she could to make it work. The beast didn't know what to make of it, briefly caught off guard by the act as it used its magic to rip a block of ice from the ground, throwing it at her, only for the attack to be dodged as she launched herself forward, driving her staff into its leg and firing off the spell. For a moment it seemed like it failed, like nothing happened, and the small part of the creature's brain that had felt a hint of fear disappeared as it made a noise she could only take as a laugh as she jumped away from it, the staff crumbling to dust in her hands. It was a creature whose sole purpose was to kill, and it was made to enjoy the act. Having Ben in its hand but forced to resist just crushing him for as long as it could had been as amusing for it as it had been aggravating. But the longer the fight went on, the more it could feel that resistance fading as it tried to take a step forward to get its hands on its second victim, only to fail. It couldn't move its legs, and as it looked down in confusion it could only barely understand why as it saw they turned to stone, with its effect slowly growing upward, crawling to its torso as it flailed around in protest and fear, then its lower set of arms, its upper set, and finally making its way to its head as it was frozen in a permanent scream. As with any time a skill awakened, Thera's body lit up as it rushed to absorb all of the mana it could now hold from the change, but unlike for a normal person who might have a few hundred in their status, Thera originally had almost 300,000. Not only did the light fail to stop, but all of the creatures around her felt the effects, even her aunt, as every bit of ambient mana in the surroundings rushed to her, not letting any of them replenish their reserves as they fired their spells, all while Thera didn't stop to appreciate the notifications ringing in her head, instead going to attack with the new source of stone at her fingertips. Feeling the change to her, Thera didn't worry about her lack of staff as she took the petrified monster apart, using it as she would any other bit of stone, and tore it into gravel to be fired into the crowd as she took extra care to gently set Ben to the ground. In her spite, and as the only bit of revenge she could take, she exerted herself in the second after each of Vividus's monsters had turned to nothing but a red mist, forcing the direction of the attack to change in the last minute to tear through her aunt's house before focusing all she had to healing Ben. "I'm so sorry, I thought it was a good idea to bring you around that maniac," she said, holding his face as she flooded him with her mana, trying to force his body to warm itself up as she healed the many injuries he'd gained from being squeezed for so long. All of his ribs were broken and it seemed like his entire body was bruised. But despite that, he managed to smile as he coughed out a few words. "I knew you'd save me, so it's all good. Let's just never ever come back." "Agreed. Destroying the house was a little childish of you," Vividus said offhandedly as she walked up. "You bastard. And throwing a temper tantrum will gain you nothing. I got the result I'd hoped for, so let's finish up here," she said, placing a hand on both of them to heal them quickly. "Although I suppose you'll need to dig through the wreckage first to find your things." Once they'd found their bags, the creature with the space magic that had brought them there came out of hiding, opening a portal back to the Life Valley where both Ben and Thera wanted nothing more than to leave, only waiting to finally get an answer on what was happening to Ben. They'd put up with far too much to not find out. It seems to be a change facilitated by the system, so you don't have to worry about the organs doing anything negative to him at the very least. Demon bodies are constantly trying to grow and adapt, so their very cells feed on the life and death mana they give off to make it happen. I said before when you first gained them that the skill probably came because they were feeding on a small amount of mana, but given the boy's nature they couldn't actually use the ones they'd been built for. In that sense you could say they'd changed to match him as much as he's been changed by them. They seem to now be fully satisfied using the non-affinity mana that fills his body instead of struggling along with it as a lower-class option. As for how they're changing him, though, it seems to be slowly changing his body into a better version of itself, just as a demon's would, though on a much weaker scale. The lingering information from the demon's organs has fully integrated into your bloodline, so at whatever point you stop it looks like the trait will be passed on. But there really is no distinction between what of you is human and what's demon anymore. Since your race on your card hasn't changed, the system still seems to consider you human despite that, so I wouldn't worry about it personally. Though it's likely that it's making it easier for that demon soul to possess you, so I'd stop with that. Even if you get to the 9th level, it shouldn't really be a problem, though I can't infer anything if you ever manage to awaken it. Of course, we could preemptively try to dull any effect awakening it would have by adding more animal parts to you. It would have the side benefit of potentially making you significantly more useful. "I'm not letting you experiment Ben after you already tried to kill him, you bitch," Thera yelled at her aunt. "Do you only see people for whatever benefit they could give?" Before she could react, Vividus had her by the face, pulling her in close. "Yes, you mortals have no idea what's coming, but I've watched a world burn already. Make no mistake, Thera, you've become a little useful at this point. But if weren't for Abris being such a bother, I'd be happy to turn you into the weapon I know you could be. Turn me into a weapon, and the first person I'm pointing myself at is you. I don't particularly care if I live or die if it means someone having the strength to kill the invaders. So do your best." The Great Spirit spoke in a voice filled with condescension, lightly tapping Thera's cheek before turning and walking away. "Of course, if you ever decide you want to improve yourself, then feel free to visit again. I'm sure I could squeeze some more levels out of you before you know it." "Not happening," Thera said back, taking Ben's hand and storming out of the building before ripping stone from the ground to carry them both to the gate out of the Life Valley as fast as possible, neither of them wanting to waste a moment there longer. Thera was seething as they went through the streets of Analia to pick up the cart they'd left at the church before finally going on their way home, to the point that anyone else walking around them took a wide berth. With her anger came a feeling of pressure as her mana came off her without any intent, all of it moving without any conscious thought from her, just from how much it had grown. Awakening 2 skills had put her halfway to what a Great Spirit had, but what she'd had to deal with to get there had kept it from being the happy experience she thought it would be. Ben could see all of this and took her hand, pulling her to the side to wrap his arms around her. "Wait, Ben, we're in public," she started, her anger briefly dropping from the surprise as the heat in her head moved to her cheeks. It's fine. Everyone has something better to do than watching us hug in the street. It looks like there's a cafe up ahead. Want to grab a bite before we start heading back home? Maybe talk things out before you decide to pour all of that emotion into speed while moving the cart. She could help but let out a small laugh at Ben's touch of fear coming out and gave in. She didn't want to focus on her anger, but if she didn't do something, it wouldn't be going away anytime soon. They got their food and took seats outside, watching people pass as they munched away, Ben waiting for her to say something. I just can't believe. You know what, scratch that. I can completely believe she'd pull something like that. I just wasn't expecting it. No matter how it turned out, I'm not going near that psycho again unless I'm ever strong enough to put her in the ground. Well, I know it's probably not the easiest, but why don't you tell me about just what good came with it? From the way that light blinded me for a bit, it seems like your changes are going to be a pretty big deal. MMH, well, don't expect it again anytime soon. I managed to knock off both earth and life magic with that last spell. Wait, really? That's awesome. So what did you end up picking for your quest then? It had completely slipped her mind. She'd been so angry when the notifications had been going off that she'd completely forgotten about it. Even after they'd left. I have no idea what to pick since I managed to awaken my first choice anyway, she muttered as she pulled out her card, trying to decide quickly. Wait, we don't need to pick these things immediately? In that case, why not leave it and level up something a couple times, then try again for that easy awakening? Ben, if you leave a quest like this, then the next skill that levels up will just get a level on top of it if you try to wait too long. How do you not know this? 'Cause I'm a cute little otherworlder that's never worried about the logistics of quests before. But good to know. I guess I won't be trying to scam Myriad then. You shouldn't be trying to scam your god to begin with, she told him, and based on his reaction was positive his god was saying the same thing. Anyway, with a reward like this, the worst option would be if I somehow gained a random passive skill in the meantime and it shot it up to level 1. What do you think I should do? She handed him her card and watched him read it over, with no real reaction coming from him for her attributes since he could do the math and easily knew how they'd ended up, though she did notice him mouthing the names of her awakened skills. Did you level up your telekinesis during all of that? I did. A couple other skills too. Okay, this is obviously your choice, but in your position I think I'd choose one of 3 options. Either your telekinesis since it just went up and in theory would be the hardest to raise again, your dark magic since you'd be able to raise its level without having to worry about your charm going up with it, or you could do your charm. As he said it, he saw the look in her eyes and raised his hands, wanting to explain. You just gained a level to it not too long ago, so with your brace your effect at a distance is -1. Gaining another level would put you at an effect of 1, but you still wouldn't need to wear the cloak with that. Resistances are just as fundamental to the soul as affinities are. There's no such thing as a person with a resistance of 0, so it would be fine, and it would get you a lot closer to the 6th level where you should be able to suppress your charm yourself. She understood what he was saying. In fact, she agreed when she heard it. In principle, it was an excellent choice. There was just one problem. She hated her charm. The very thought of intentionally raising it felt revolting to her, even if she knew that it would help her in the long run. Even if she knew from experience it had its uses, she just couldn't make herself do it. That left her with the other 2 options, both of which were good points. Telekinesis was a non-affinitied magic, already difficult to raise to greater heights. She'd had a lot of luck with it recently, but who was to say it would keep up? Then there was her dark magic, one that had proven itself incredibly useful, especially during the time that Ben had been lost in the trial. But when she didn't need to use it and wasn't having it act as an outlet for her emotions, it felt hard to make herself train as well, with the ever-present knowledge that it could raise her charm. In the end, thinking of it that way did make things easier. She knew her dark magic was useful, but she had an aversion to training it too much, while her telekinesis may have been harder to work on in principle, but it was one she could practice happily without a second thought. I'll take a level to my dark magic. Cool. And with that done, I couldn't help but notice one more thing on your card that needs to change, he told her as he pulled out his personal job crystal and handed it over. It was as good of a distraction as anything, and she couldn't deny some level of excitement at seeing the options she knew would be there now that she'd calmed down a bit. even if she hated just how it had happened. Available jobs: Queen of Mana, Musician, Professional Dancer, Bard, Darkness Mage Charm Specialized, Healer, Dark Mage, Staff User, Master Earth Mage, Master Life Mage. Oh yeah, now that I'm at the first level of Staff Wielder, I guess I've got the job for it. My list still feels pretty small though with how much time I've got. If I ever run out, I'll actually need to look for skills that would give me jobs. Here's hoping after this one, the system gives me plenty of options. I choose Master Earth Mage. In a lush valley far from Ben and Thera, a number of spirits gathered. They weren't the great spirits but the common ones, members of all 8 affinities that existed on the world, meeting to talk about things beyond the magics they belonged to. They had gone to talk about the Earthkin, trying to understand exactly what she was to them. Even for a mortal, that might have been a challenge, as it would mean defining just what a great spirit was to a regular one, though they themselves typically didn't view it as such an issue. The great spirits were the great spirits, that was enough for them, and something they understood on a fundamental level, a structure of their race as a whole they normally never questioned, at least until recently. They'd always know that Thera had a deep connection with the great Earth Spirit, potentially deeper than any other Earth Spirit shared with him, or at the very least different, and while they had all become aware of the connection upon Thera's birth, none of them had shared more than a passing curiosity before going back to their own interests, at least until she'd show just what she could offer them. As mana-based lifeforms, the way they used it was fundamentally different from mortals, with the great spirits reaching heights they never could, but despite all of that, none of them could do what she had started to. None of them could share mana with the others to help replenish their stock. It sounded like such a simple thing, but since she'd revealed the skill to them, it had fundamentally changed the way they lived on the world. Previously, producing new spirits had been a rare act for the potential dangers that it had for them, but no longer. Spirits could be born in numbers without having to worry about running out of mana and lives in the process, and they'd had to start organizing themselves to ensure each group had a fair turn at it. But with that growth and interaction came the question that was now on all of their minds. It's the familial connection of mortals, one of the life spirits explained, as the others that matched its affinity, as well as the death spirits, gave their agreement to the ones less aware of these things. She's called that because that's what she is, a kin of the Earthen One. But the Earthen One is not mortal, a fire spirit argued. How could he have mortal kin? Another structure of this world system. We've each had it bound to us too, who knows? We might be able to produce kin with them as well. A round of disinterest went up among them at the thought as a death spirit brought them back on track. That is what she is to them, but what is she to us? Muttering and questions came up until they were forced to come to a conclusion. They'd never figure out what Thera was to them unless they were able to define what Abris was in mortal terms. Is the Earthen One our god? One asked, feeling unsure as they did. The world they came from had no gods like a normal life-bearing planet, nor did they feel like they needed any, same as any mana-based race. They had been aware of the concept even all the way back on their homeworld as the occasional void god passed by their star with their race and curiosity, surprised to see a world teeming with such unique life and no god around who uplifted them, and they'd become more familiar with the concept as a whole since arriving at this one. The many gods of this world had been openly curious when they'd arrived, and even tried to see what their potential was, though without much luck. Their mana wouldn't grow, even after receiving a blessing from one of them, and no matter how many centuries passed, none of their magics awakened to something greater, even with the help of the system. They could gain other skills if they so desired and had the potential to try and train and raise them up to greater heights, but for the vast majority of them, they simply lacked interest. They'd rather do as they always had, indulge in their affinity as they drifted through the world. To the question, it quickly fell to disagreement. The Earthen One was not their god. None of the great spirits were. They were better than any god, with them in the world, able to act immediately if need be and not constantly worrying about spending their power. A god needed mortals to get their faith. A great spirit just needed to be part of the universe to use its mana. If not a god, then what? What could be the right way to address all that the Earthen One is? Perhaps a leader? A leader. A leader. The word was tossed around amongst them. It felt closer than a god, but just calling him a leader was far from capturing his glory until one of the death spirits spoke up, thinking of the many funerals it had seen and what sort of mortal received anything remotely close to what a great spirit would be worthy of. What about a king? A king! A king! The word went up amongst them as they thought it over, seeing how it felt. Someone who wasn't just the greatest of leaders, or at least should be to have the title, but a ruler as well. But did the great spirits rule them? That was harder to say. It felt more like they acted to guide and protect, but if any of them were to give an order, it would be shocking if a spirit would ever feel compelled to disobey. If it's the closest we can get to capturing all that a great one is through the limited thoughts of mortals, then so be it. If the great ones are our kings in their eyes, that still doesn't explain what the earthkin is to us. The great one's progeny is female, a life spirit explained. If we are to measure by mortal standards, then she would be our princess. Princess. They rolled the word around, seeing how it fit and finding it to be surprisingly good, even if not quite right in the same way it was wrong to call Abris their king. Perhaps in the past they wouldn't bother following her orders if she had given any, or at least not followed them on her own merit, but whenever she spoke to any she was kind, and now she was spending tens of thousands of mana each week to help make up what they'd lost. If she needed help they would give it freely. If she was in danger many of them would happily lay down their long lives for her sake. The title had grown to fit all too well. Then she is our earthen princess. One of the earth spirits said happily, all but claiming her as their own as the other ones buzzed about around it. She is just as competent at life magic, she could just as easily be our life princess. A life spirit argued, feeling the desire to claim her, as well as the dark spirits brought forth a very powerful counterpoint. Dark magic comes more naturally to her than anything else, it argued, having no idea how much the person in question would dislike that assessment. It's radiated from her body in a never-ending stream since the day she began. Surely, if anything, she would be our dark princess. Does it make sense for the kin of the great earthen one to be anything other than the earthen princess? An earth spirit argued back. She has been the earthkin to us for so long. To act like that is not her root is ridiculous. It was as these three groups were fighting that the other 5 affinities stepped up. They all knew Thera didn't have access to their affinities, a fact that made it harder for her to give them mana. But she did anyway, and they loved her all the more for it. She helps all of us equally. Is it not right we all give her the proper respect for the act? An air spirit asked, breaking up the argument between the ones that shared her affinity. She has shown she deserves respect from all spirits regardless of their magic. She can be princess to all of us. The others that lacked the affinities she possessed were quick to agree to the statement, and eventually the rest gave in. She worked for all of them, she was their princess. With that settled, the discussion ended, each spirit going off to their separate ways, spreading the word as they went. Name Thera Oris. Race: Succubus/Spirit Hybrid. Titles: Spirit Child, Madman's Lover. Jobs: Master Earth Mage, LV0. Previous jobs: Beginner Dancer, Dancer, Apprentice Mage, Earth Mage, True Mage, High Earth Mage, Spirit Mage, Life Mage, High Life Mage, Telekinetic Mage, Adventurer, High Telekinetic Mage, High Spirit Mage. Attributes: A Vitality, 2034. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 27 per hour.
Mana, 494,604.
Mana Recovery Rate, 137 per minute. Strength, 257. Agility, 722. Stamina, 600. Intelligence, 638. Affinities: A Light, 4. Life 22. Fire 11. Water 14. Air 12. Earth 103. Death 3. Dark 43. Space 2. Time 1. Resistances: A Light 5. Life 9. Fire 11. Water 16. Air 12. Earth 35. Death 13. Dark 42. Space 7. Time 8. Blessed Skills: Spiritual Earth Magic LV0*. Charm Magic LV4. Passive Skills: World Speak Plus. Coordination LV4. A bind. A mana recovery rate enhancement LV1. Earth Sense LV0. Active skills. Calculate LV1. Dance LV4. The String Instrument LV3. A Woodwind Instrument LV3. Cleaning LV1. Staff Wielder LV1. Meditation LV2. Speed Reading LV3. Spiritual Life Magic LV0*. Telekinesis LV7. Dark Magic LV7. Spirit Empowering LV5. Cooking LV0.
Mana Examination Elfenol.
Blessings. Analia's Blessing. Elvet's Life Magic Blessing. Quaxa's Blessing. Trials. Trial of Analia and Talona. Looking at her card after taking the job, it was easier to ignore what had gotten her there and just enjoy the moment. She was now a Master Earth Mage, a job that seemed so far out of her reach even only a few years ago, but now it felt like it had happened in a flash. Beyond that, just ignoring her outrageous mana pool, all of her other attributes had gone far beyond what a typical mortal might have, meaning she could comfortably put most people to shame with the power she felt flowing through her, even if they had skills and jobs geared towards training those areas. Her strength alone, lowest of all of her values, could now give her a fighting chance against some lower-rank adventurers who had it as their focus. She was also curious about how her awakened magics would compare against others. They had clearly changed in a way that reflected her heritage, but she had no clue how they'd compare against someone who just had them listed as the high versions of the magic. And the fact that her life magic hadn't moved to the passive part of her status meant she still wasn't able to use it the way a spirit would, at least if her aunt was to be believed. Still, once the stress of everything that they'd gone through managed to leave her, she thought she'd have quite a good time exploring it and was eager to see what other changes the future had in store for her now. Right until the system answered. "Everything okay, Thera?" Ben asked her, instantly seeing the change in her eyes that she tried to brush off. "Yeah, it's just all a lot to take in," she told him as a completely different thought went through her head. Gods above, why did I just get this title? She wondered in horror, feeling a sudden understanding for any time Ben complained about a change to his status, all the while swearing to herself that she would put off telling him about it for as long as possible. He had way too much fun teasing me when he found out about Mom. I'll hear about this for weeks if he ever finds out. Having no clue how she was supposed to begin reacting to the sudden and unexpected title, she tried to keep from thinking too much about it, instead focusing on getting to the cart and finally returning to Stonewall after many long months away. "Just for the record, I want to make it clear I hate every part of this," Ben said as they made their way back to Stonewall, holding his seat in a death grip from the stress that only he was feeling. Thera, for her part, was ecstatic. She'd thought it was a brilliant idea as soon as she'd had it, taking advantage of the improvements to her earth magic to use the cart in a completely different way, raising it into the air as soon as they left the city limits, not just letting them avoid any traffic but the nature of the road itself, not having to worry about any bumps or curves in it as she carried them in a straight line right back home, bringing the previous, already low travel time of 2 days down to less than 1. "Don't be a baby about it, Ben. I'll bring us down in a couple minutes. As funny as it would be, I can't exactly fly us through town." Thank God. The journey back through the skies had been uneventful as they went, and by the time they could see their home in the distance, Thera lowered them and brought down their speeds to a far more reasonable pace, letting Ben drop some of the tension the entire ride had brought. "I honestly don't see how this bothers you so much," Thera told him with a nudge. "I've seen you do much more dangerous things. Maybe, but I can't shake my roots of coming from a world with proper road safety standards. Don't want to either. If you want to fly more often, I need to at least figure out some safety features, not to mention making something a bit more aerodynamic than the cart. It would probably cut down on the mana cost too. Actually, how would I go about all of that?" He trailed off as he played with the idea in his many minds, feeling curious about it despite himself, but tried to spare a few to soak in the feeling of being back in town after so long. What had meant to be a crafting competition had ended up being so much more, but it felt good to be home. The streets seemed the same as usual at first, people going about their days as they always did, but it wasn't long before he began to pick up on more changes. Empty shops that had been bustling in the past and houses for sale in what seemed like previously thriving neighborhoods. It was subtle, but the change was there as people left when they learned of the beginning of the invasion. It was a little surprising to him to see it affecting Stonewall. They were relatively safe there, all things considered. Not particularly close to any invasion point, he'd expected more people to be escaping to the town if anything, but the world was filled with people who felt like they had to fight or wanted to be closer to distant family with what was to come. Still, no point worrying about it. Since no nation took him in, he was just some guy in the end, his biggest role being the act of selling and making weapons, so he chose to ignore the thoughts so closely tied to the world's inevitable demise in favor of being home. They first stopped at the shop, parking the cart there for Ben to figure out what to do with everything that filled it later. Aside from the many crates of books he'd bought from the various guilds of all faith, there was also the matter of all of the materials he'd come back with, both from the trial as well as buying from Abris. He wouldn't be lacking anytime soon and could afford to be a bit less thrifty with them now than in the past. But that would be for later. For the time being, they had people to see, people to let know he was alive, and they started with the closest, walking into Fawkes' shop as the day was ending and finding the Yeti sweeping up, the broom falling from his hand as they both came through the door. "What's up, Fawkes? Hope you weren't hoping to get out of training an apprentice," Ben said in greeting. Smile stretched across his face and not expecting his teacher to be over in a flash, having the both of them in a tight hug. "Damnable boy. Someone needs to start tying you to a fence post when nobody's watching you to keep you out of trouble." "Well, Thera said she's going to be doing that from now on. By the way, I'm dating your niece." "Ben!" She yelled at him, not expecting things to come out so bluntly, even if she hadn't planned on hiding it from her aunt and uncle the same way she did for her parents. Fawkes, for his part, was completely unfazed. "Well, color me the opposite of shocked. What's actually surprising is seeing you without a cloak," he said, stepping away and looking at his niece before his eyes locked on her brace and widened in shock. He gently took Thera's hand, raising it up to give him a better look at the design of the enchantment as he pored over it, words coming out without any thought. "You awakened your enchanting. And this isn't just the high form either. Not just awakened, but got it to the first level. You're looking at the holder of divine enchanting Fawkes," Ben said proudly, happy to brag about his growth. "Actually, there's a lot to catch you up on, but I'll tell you all about it tomorrow. Got other people to see before the day is up." "Wait, don't tell me you stopped here first?" "We had to drop the cart off. Then off with you both. You have no idea how worried Sonia's been. I know she has the day off today, so just rush home." "Will do." They both wanted to see her anyway, so that became their next stop as they ran off. Rushing through the town, Ben noticed a few looks from some of the people he passed, but made the choice to ignore whatever it was for the time being. As they got home, they were going to rush into the building, only stopping to go around it as they heard noises coming from out back. It was when they went to the yard instead that they found Sonia and the guild master Cecily, all of their focus on each other as blows were exchanged. Ben was stunned to a stop and didn't know if he should rush in to try and end whatever had caused this. But a quick look from Thera and the feel of her hand on his arm kept him from moving. He could see it in her eyes. She was excited. It seemed they had arrived just at the tail end of it. Both were tired and sweating as Sonia threw a quick punch that Cecily ducked to avoid, responding with an uppercut to the jaw that Sonia took, her healing magic activating in an instant to repair the damage from the hit but still knocking her off balance as the guild master took advantage of it, bringing her to the ground and holding her in place. "You're still a little rusty," Cecily said with a grin while pinning her. "I'm not rusty. I've just had a very peaceful few decades. You've just gotten better." "True," she said gleefully, starting to get off of Sonia and freezing as she noticed Ben and Thera watching from the side. A series of looks flashed across her eyes. Surprise, happiness, and strangely enough suspicion and judgment as she finally moved, speaking up as she did. Well, looks like someone finally returned home." "What?" Sonia yelled, turning to see them and rushing over as she took them in her arms and hugged them tightly. "Thera, Ben, it's so good to have you both back. Oh gods, I missed you both so much, and Fawkes told me Ben had died. But then we heard you escaped, but you both didn't come back and—" "Wait, did your eyes change color, Ben?" "Oh, so this is Thera," Cecily said happily, the bits of suspicion and judgment gone from her face, leaving her to beam at their return. Sorry, I didn't recognize you without your cloak. Managed to get your passive effects under control. Mostly, but being touched could still be dangerous, she explained through the crushing grip of her aunt's hug. I'll make sure to wear sleeves around town though, so don't worry. It's fine. If it sounds good with you, I'll make an official announcement at the guild tomorrow to make things clear with everyone, though you should both stop by today. I know Ankh was especially worried when they'd heard the word that your apostle over there had died and you hadn't come back to town yet. Also heard that you awakened a skill, Ben. Gotta get you listed as a second-ranked adventurer ASAP. It's crafting. It's no good for being an adventurer. Why do you need to do this to me? And just as importantly, why do you know I'm an apostle? Ha, when word got out you died. Sakhel held a memorial for you at your church in town, and rules are rules, even if they were set up without any expectation that a person without combat skills might end up succeeding as an adventurer. He mentally swore revenge against the oracle of his faith for not mentioning the fact that she'd outed him when they'd seen each other, as he also dealt with the knowledge that he wasn't getting out of having his rank go up. By that point, he was almost certain that Cecily was forcing the matter for her own amusement more than due to the flaws of any rules. Well, I should head back and start setting up the paperwork, so stop by in a bit, the guild master told them, still laughing as she left. For just a moment, it looked like Thera was going to give her a heads up about her own skills. But Ben took her hand and shook her head. If Cecily was going to take such delight in raising his rank, then he'd take delight in giving her some unexpected work. Especially since, according to the rules he was aware of, they wouldn't be becoming rank 2 adventurers, but rank 1. With that done, Sonia ushered them into the house, pulling out snacks and drinks to enjoy as they all caught up about exactly what happened. Both of them left the details light on his time in the trial, seeing no point in worrying her about what was already done to focus more on what happened after. Through all of that, Ben didn't give the reveal the same way he had with Falk. Since Thera hadn't seemed thrilled with how he'd spilled the beans, he decided to leave it to her this time, and she knew it. Each time a point came up where it would have been natural, she started to say something, only to end up beating around the bush, until finally she looked to him in defeat as he said it casually. And by the way, me and Thera are dating now. Really? Sonia started, her eyes lighting up at the words. Oh, that's wonderful. I always thought it would happen sooner or later. I absolutely need to know how your mom reacted to the news. She doesn't know yet, Thera admitted. I'll tell her eventually. So could you keep it from her for the time being? As Sonia's smile took on the same playful look Polinia's did any time she found herself with something amusing, it was easier than ever for Ben to see that they were in fact sisters. Of course, in that case, I can't wait to find out how she'll react knowing that I got to know long before her. Oh, this is just going to eat her up. But anyway, I guess this means I get my spare room back then. It took a second for either of them to know what she was implying as she looked at them with laughing eyes. But when it snapped in place for Thera, her face flushed a deep gold. Auntie, it's way too soon to be thinking about something like that. Really? But don't you both share a tent when you hunt anyway? And it sounds like you've been in close quarters ever since Ben got out of the trial. That was just necessity. This is different, his God asked. I mean, I wouldn't be against it, but I'm not going to force the issue. Hell, where I'm from, moving in together is considered a pretty big step. Choosing to ignore his God, Ben instead changed the topic to spare Thera's embarrassment. But ignoring all that, why were you and Cecily fighting? Since when do you fight? It completely clashed with his normal view of Sonia as a peaceful and dedicated life mage who was ever focused on her role as one of the town's main healers. But when he asked, both of the women with him looked at him in confusion. Ben, you knew my aunt used to work as an adventurer with Mom and Uncle. Yeah. I thought as their party healer or something. I guess it doesn't actually come up much since it's been so long since I've actually done anything with it. But both me and Pelania acted as a team of fighters before Falk joined us. Since we both had an aptitude for life magic, it was just a way to let us fight longer originally. But when I retired, I decided to put it to use helping others. Alright, honestly would never have guessed that, but cool. So what has you getting back into the groove of it? She'd show no signs of training regularly in all of the time they'd lived together. But the answer should have been obvious. The invasion's coming. If I'm gonna fight, then I need to get back into it. It hadn't even occurred to him that Sonia might actively fight in it, though Thera wasn't surprised. Do you know what invasion point you're going to go to? Fox going to defend Craftsman's Tower, so I'll be joining him. Have you given it any thought? Of course not. I should be working some safe distance away to maintain any weapons if anything. Hell, wouldn't Sonia be better off working as a healer than anything? Why go anywhere close to where the main battles will? I've told you before, Auntie. I'm going wherever you go. With 2 awakened magics, I should be a lot of help too, so I won't be holding you or Uncle back. Don't worry. He tried to keep any expression from his face as he heard Thera say that. A small part of him had been aware that she might want to do something, and with her skills and power it couldn't be denied that she could make a difference. But he'd never let himself consciously acknowledge it until she said it. The girl he loved intended to actually fight in the main force, and he had no idea how to handle that. Getting to the guild, Ben ignored the looks along the way he now realized were due to a combination of people learning that he wasn't dead, as well as the secret that he was an apostle leaking to the town as they went inside. He needed some sort of distraction from the fact that Thera fully intended to fight in a war against a race that was all but certain to win, and dealing with Cecily raising his rank seemed like the perfect way to keep his mind off things. As they got in, Ankh immediately noticed them, seeming to go through the same range of emotions that Cecily did when they saw them, though it was harder to be certain due to a lack of any sort of facial features to help give it away. Ben, it's so nice to see you alive, she said enthusiastically despite that, though the direction of their head turned to point at where he and Thera were linking arms. And you've brought a new friend. No, he hasn't, Thera said. It's me as usual. I, don't need my cloak anymore. Eunk. Thera. So that's what you look like. Oh my, aren't you lovely? I completely couldn't recognize you. They said. Any hesitation vanished, leaving them filled with nothing but the joy of the 2 of them returning. It's been so long. Cecily mentioned that the 2 of you would be coming, but when you walked in well, anyway, I was told I should check your cards. Or you could not, Ben suggested as Thera was already eagerly handing hers over. Come now, it's fine, let's see dash. Their words dropped off in an instant as they processed whatever information the guild was able to read from the cards without a person revealing it, seeming to struggle to mentally process what they were seeing before leaning forward in a hushed voice. You awakened 2 skills? Emicham, she said, trying to contain her smile. Not to mention all of these kills, how did you dash? We don't need to focus on that bit too much, Thera told her, not wanting to think too hard on when she'd completely cut loose during her training alone in the woods. If you just transfer over whatever I've earned for those kills, it's fine. Of course, no wonder Cecily wants to see you. Then how about you, Ben? Wait, 3. Ahem. Anyway, could we keep this private? Also, it doesn't show which ones, does it? No, our systems only pick up that you have them, none of the finer details. Cool, I guess. With the shock to their favorite guild employee out of the way, they were led to Cecily's office, where she sat at her desk waiting for them. Well, Ankh, how's it look? She asked cheerfully as she finished up the paperwork to send off to the head guild. While she had full authority to update Ben's card then and there, it was still important to send such information out for record-keeping purposes. The issue was that everything she'd written was meaningless, and there was about to be a lot more. It looks like we have 2 rank 1 adventurers in town, Ankh told her happily as Cecily took a moment to process it before sadly looking down at the papers she'd finished and tossing them into the trash. You could have mentioned this earlier. Where's the fun in that? Ben laughed, enjoying his bit of revenge before asking the most important question. But more importantly, what are the actually responsibilities and benefits that will keep me from just quitting when I hear them? I'm sure not as bad as you'd expect. Most organizations tend to prefer to keep awakened skill holders happy, especially since it would be easy for you to find work elsewhere. Hell, at this stage we can't even ask you to move for us, but if you take on the requests we give, then there's a lot to gain. The pay is on a different level for anything that would be a rank 1 quest, not to mention accommodations. If you ever take one, on the way there and the way back, whenever possible we'll ensure you only stay in the best inns with meals covered for whatever you desire. Of course, we can't promise that all quests would occur in areas where that would be possible, but it would happen enough. Except I'm rich, and as the holder of an awakened crafting skill, it would be hard to find any better cooks than me. There's more still, relax. By far, the biggest benefit would be gaining access to the job Master Adventurer. It grants major bonuses to all skills and attributes, so it's something to be envied for anyone who unlocks it. More aligned with your interests, though, would be that the guild would now send you the books you've been ordering for free, and at a faster pace than you currently get them too. She saw Ben's eyes light up at that and knew she had him. Even if he didn't personally believe he could offer much as an adventurer to make staying worthwhile, from what she'd seen it was worth it for the guild to try and keep him. No longer hesitating, Ben and Thera handed over their cards to be marked with their rank. And as Thera stared at hers, eyes glittering, Ben wasted no time in asking for exactly what he wanted. All right, now that that's done, send me everything. Sorry, Cecily asked, thinking she'd misheard. You said by doing this the guild could get me any books and information it could, so I want all it has to offer. Send me everything. Ben, I know you're eager, but that's thousands of books across dozens, maybe hundreds of topics. There's no point, the guild master argued as she tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't be dissuaded. If it's only a few thousand, then I'll likely burn through them all in a year or two. Tops. I'm very fast at it. She could tell from his eyes that she wouldn't be changing his mind and gave in, accepting the fact that she would have to think hard on just how she was going to submit such a ridiculous request as she tried to finish up. Just don't expect them to all come in at once. Okay? Anyway, for the paperwork I am supposed to ask what skills you got to the second tier. You can decline, but we prefer to try and have an idea on where to send you. That would be of the greatest assistance. I awaken my earth and life magic, Thera shared, having no issue with the guild knowing. Crafting and enchanting. If the guild has a quest that would need those, I guess I'd be curious. What about your third, Ben? Ankh asked from the back, getting a blank look from the guild master. You left for a few months and came back with 3 awakened skills? At that, Ben smiled, placing a single finger over his lips. Secret. It's not anything the guild could make use of, so don't worry about it. If that's all, then I'm sure I'll be seeing you both soon enough. But life's been exhausting, and now that I'm home I just want to rest. Did they seem odd to you? Thera asked him as they walked, thinking back to how both Cecily and Ankh had both acted right when they'd first arrived, only to drop whatever weird feeling had been there a few moments later. A fact that Ben had noticed too and had at least some idea about. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they thought I was cheating on you or something, he explained offhand, making Thera stop in her tracks as he said it. What? They didn't realize who you were at first, right? The moment they knew it was you, they were a lot happier to see us. What? She asked again, not knowing how she was supposed to react to that. Ben, don't be ridiculous. We weren't even like that when we left. Why would that matter? Ha, all I'm saying is they saw me arrive back with some random beautiful girl, no cloaked figure in sight, and made some sort of assumption before they knew it was you. Maybe I'm wrong though, you can always ask them. She thought about the prospect of doing exactly that but didn't know how she would ever react if he was right, so instead decided to let the matter drop entirely. It felt like she would be happier if she just ignored it and let it drift from her mind instead of focusing on whatever ideas people had about them, however accurate they currently were. Getting back home, they enjoyed all of the smaller things that came with their normal life that they'd missed after so long. Sonia prepared a feast for dinner to celebrate their return, and after it continued on as things normally did. They caught up some more, played some games to pass the time, and eventually split up for the night, with Thera stopping Ben outside of his door just before he went in, pulling him into a kiss. Her hands on his back, he didn't notice the bit of mana she directed through him, too focused on his girlfriend in his arms. Ha! You sure you don't want to move in already? He teased as she pushed him away. Just enjoy what you get. Sleep well, Ben. You too, Thera. With that they parted, Ben going to his room after so long away and smiled at his houseplant, lovingly cared for by Sonia while he was gone, though in need of pruning. It had grown significantly since he'd last seen it, becoming more like a small tree by that point, likely in large part thanks to the enchantment in its pot, and he'd need to make a new one soon. Touching its branches, He connected to it briefly, sending it a greeting from his mind of warmth and love and feeling it respond in kind before he sat at his desk, the container that sealed the core of the Talos Inyx still waiting for the day it could be freed. Sorry it's been so long, Inyx. Had a busy few months and almost died a few times, the usual. The good news is I've made a lot of progress towards what I need to for making you a new body. Maybe even an overwhelming amount of progress. I have to assume the enchantments that made you up were decaying because the god that made you put more into them than it could really manage with its skill, so you must have been less stable than other mythic items. At least that's my working theory, since I've never heard of a god needing to maintain a trial. Either way though, I've stumbled across a far more stable way of doing things that I've incorporated into my usual techniques. I might actually be able to get you sorted with a lower level than expected, though it will still be a while. Either way, just thought I'd let you know. His one-sided conversation done with a being that likely couldn't even hear him to begin with. Ben laid in bed, feeling comfortable after such a long time as he brought himself to his god's realm. So if you look at this area here, we believe that its purpose is to both slow the flow of mana from the previous section, while at the same time directing it to the next 4 at different rates with different interactions depending on the area, Hellori told him, pointing out different spots of the summoning spell one by one as she explained what few insights and theories the gods who had bothered to study its structure in detail were able to unravel. Of course, this is all just conjecture. We feel fairly certain this is correct from what we've seen when the spell was actually activated, but the finer details escape us. Still, if we can modify this, I can already see a potential option to drastically reduce the cost, Ben said, getting a curious look from the goddess. Though it might not actually be any easier. A light I'll bite. What do you think could be done? She asked, more to humor him than anything, not truly believing he could come up with a way to reduce the cost of a spell he didn't understand. Well, we already know the Grey can project themselves through realities, which means that they have a way of repeatedly finding this one again, so any part of the spell devoted to pointing out the way there and the way back could potentially be stripped away. But what I think would save the most is if they could open a hole in their reality from their end. Think about it, the fact that they can interact with any universes to any extent shows they can likely weaken the boundary at least. If they can tear the hole themselves, then that's a bunch of mana and faith that doesn't need to come from this one to do the job. While untested, the goddess couldn't find any immediate flaw with the argument to correct him on like she'd expected to. Any known time a summoning had been carried out, there hadn't been a chance to talk and plan with the different worlds that people would be taken from, but the power of the Grey's technology changed that completely. A genuinely decent idea, she muttered as she tossed it over. Depending on how well it works, that could change from bringing over a few thousand at the very best to bringing tens of thousands. There's still obviously issues, of course. So much of the power saved would be lost constructing them bodies, not to mention that the idea is built on the notion that the spell can be modified at all, that a single piece being pulled won't make the whole thing tumble. But I'll bring it to the other magic and knowledge gods at least. As busy as we are, there are occasional bits of downtime. I'm sure at least a few would be interested in pursuing that line of reasoning. All progress is progress, he muttered to her, as he continued on with his language lessons from his god in a different mind in his head. With so many of them now, it was easy to have a handful devoted to his lessons on spell structure with Hellori, as others were split between reviewing what he'd learned of one of her people's dead languages, as the rest focused on the madness that was the one Myriad was teaching him. He couldn't deny that it was interesting, the issue was solely that it was insane. That wasn't even mentioning the fact that he'd never be able to replicate it with his mouth. While it did have spoken components to it, many of them seemed to require facial structures that he was almost certain every race on the planet lacked, and that wasn't even mentioning the unspoken parts of the language. Myriad's people could naturally link minds with one another. It was undeniably strange, but Ben had long grown used to doing it himself, considering the ability to be one of his main core skills. The issue revolved around how language would develop and evolve with that trait present. Requiring sounds it was difficult enough to think accurately, let alone have any chance of ever speaking. The challenge level compared to the ones Hellori had been teaching him was astronomical, but he was making progress on that front, albeit slow. If I can actually learn any of the ones Myriad wants to teach me, then I'm golden. There's no way I would fail to decode a language if I can learn this nonsense. I heard that, Ben. This language isn't nonsense. It has a rich history and culture that it was built up to fit the needs of that perfectly complements my people. Sure, except every word lacks meaning on its own. Meaning there's no way to make a dictionary for it, and it doesn't have verbs or adjectives, but some weird alternative I'm pretty sure doesn't have a name in English or I'll speak. That's part of its charm. That charm is going to make my eyes bleed. Despite how good it felt to be home, despite how much he wanted to stay in bed for just a little longer, acting as if there was nothing for him to do, Ben got up earlier than he typically would. Both Sonia and Thera planned to go to the clinic earlier than normal. Sonia to help out as she always did while still making time for her practice later in the day, and Thera because she felt bad for being gone so much longer than she'd planned, even if she wasn't a true member of the clinic specifically so she could disappear for long stretches of time if need be. Considering all of that, he cleaned up and went to the kitchen, digging around to see what ingredients Sonia had stocked up on while they were gone and decided to make something simple. Pancakes, or at least something close enough that he was comfortable calling them that, along with a fruit syrup to go with it. All of the ingredients out and gathered, he didn't need to put much conscious thought into how to use them. He poured out what he thought he needed, mixed the batter he'd made till it felt right, and cooked it till it had the perfect combination of a light golden crust on the outside and a delicate fluffy interior, and kept them warm under a cloth as he prepped the syrup, taking the juices he thought would go nicely with it and adding a sweetener along with the zest of its rind to enhance the flavor, adding pinches of a variety of spices and tasting as he went until he was sure he had something perfect. As if to agree with that assessment, the smell of the food pulled the still tired women to the kitchen, where they took their seats and only came to life as they started eating, digging in with gusto after the first bite. "Ben, you're never allowed to leave," Sonia told him happily, the taste of the meal still on her tongue. "I don't think I could manage eating my old meals anymore." "Hey, your food's a treat, Sonia. It was great getting to dig into it yesterday, too. And you can be very good with your words when you want to be," she said with a laugh. "All right, I'm just going to clean up quick and then we'll head off, Thera." "Sounds good." They both watched her leave, the two of them now alone as Thera got up and leaned against him, clearly longing for more sleep but fighting off the urge due to her guilt for leaving the clinic for so long. "Gonna make it?" Ben asked as he rubbed her head, getting a tired nod. "I'll be more awake in a bit. I'm sure the introduction to the rest of the clinic is going to be weird enough, honestly. I'm sure it will be fine. If there's any issues, just come hang out at the shop instead." "Will do," she told him, before leaning up and giving him a kiss, the same spell as the night before on her fingertips as she applied it to his back. "Ahem, if you'd like you could always come later in the day, Thera," her aunt said, neither of them realizing she'd returned. "Falk doesn't open the shop for another few hours, right? Plenty of time to enjoy some privacy." "Don't need it, Auntie," she said, blushing in the face of Sonia's teasing and rushing off shortly after, letting Ben make his way to work with a bright smile on his face, even as he worried about the future. Once he arrived, the first thing he did was lug all of the boxes they'd had in the cart inside. Stonewall was a fairly safe town and he wasn't too concerned about theft, but he had expensive things in there that he didn't want lost so quickly. Once that was done, though, he did as he always did when he got there, giving it a quick clean to be in a good condition for when Falk arrived, and then used the hours before it opened to make whatever he wanted, in that particular case an alternative to his cursed ring. When he'd first made it what felt like so long ago now, his attributes had been significantly lower, to the point that it felt hard to compare. As he currently had it, it was far too weak for him, but trying to just make a new ring wouldn't be good enough. His mana and vitality had skyrocketed, not to mention his recovery rates for both. A dinky little ring would no longer cut it. Not only that, but with how high everything he had now was, he actually had the wiggle room to make them far more dangerous than he could have in the past. Before, he was always calculating how much of each material to add to keep the drain to both his vitality and his mana as close to their recovery as possible, but as much as that had proven to work, it likely wasn't giving him all he could get in training his attribute that way. Now, if he kept the drain at a reasonable level above what he could regain, he'd still be able to wear it for hours, maybe even days at a time before taking it off to let his values regenerate. With the decision made, Ben pulled out the Morbusal and Deathstone he'd gained from the trial, seeing a grim irony in the idea of using something from it in particular to help him grow through the suffering it caused him, and got to work heating both up to bend and shape into two different braces. After making sure he didn't use too much, He finished the Deathstone bracelet by adding a layer of copper to the top of it, just in case anyone ever grabbed his wrist when he wasn't thinking, and cooled it down before putting it on, instantly feeling his life force draining. As for the more usual bracelet, he slipped it into his pocket, planning to mostly use that one as he slept, just as he'd previously done for his cursed ring. Let's see, for the Deathstone one, 2 days on and half a day off should work out okay, though I might need to occasionally have it off longer to make up for what I'm losing. Either way, not a big deal, but I should keep an eye on my card anyway. Don't want to get too comfortable and forget it completely. What an insanely stupid way to die that would be. As one final thing, he made 3 more bracelets. Nothing as inherently dangerous as the last 2. All of them just simple mithril bands he could fit a rainbow mana battery into as a way to constantly work on his enchanting before his teacher arrived. "How did I know you would be here already doing something insane?" the Yeti said from beside him, shaking his head as he did. "You just avoided a certain death, and now it looks like you're trying to kill yourself in my shop." "Oh hey Falk, this is just an extension of my ring, don't worry. My attributes have gone up so much that if I don't use something like this I won't get the same extent out of it. Not to mention my absorption resistance leveled up and I got a new skill too that would weaken the Deathstone even more. Think of it as a good thing. The bigger I need to make these, the harder I am to kill. MMH, I suppose, but that doesn't change the fact that you're off in the head. Anyway, show me." "Show you what?" he asked, playing coy. He knew exactly what his teacher wanted and was happy to show it off. It was just a matter of wanting to hear him say it. "You're enchanting, boy, obviously you're enchanting. You're gone for months, dead to the world, and you come back with the skill awakened. You have to have an example or 2 of what you've made on you, so show it already." Hearing exactly what he wanted, he reached into his bag and pulled out what he'd had on him, the things he'd made sure to bring along specifically to show off. Both a soul crystal containing a demon's soul, as well as the knife he'd been using to hold it. With a single glance, his teacher let out a long, low whistle. He knew what it was in an instant without needing to be told. His apprentice's long-held goal come true, but even more impressive was the enchantments on it. It was plain to see that it used a similar enchanting system as the trial Ben had been stuck in, but the fact he could see that he'd combined it with the 2 other main systems he used showed a shocking level of mastery. "May I?" he asked, holding out a hand. "Just don't activate it. It has the very minor and unexpected problem of the soul possessing you if you do, and I don't know if there's actually a way to use it without that being a problem." If it can possess you, then it likely has something of a mind still. If you could work a mental compulsion into it, trying to tame or enslave the soul it contains, then you might be able to do something with it. More than that though, seeing this on top of the brace, I can say that divine enchanting is no joke. Maybe 2 or 3 more levels and you'll be a better enchanter than me. "Ha, thanks, but I've seen your stuff, Falk. I don't think I could compare." "I wouldn't have said it if I didn't think it, boy. Even ignoring the infinite amount of skills at your disposal, from a purely technical standpoint, this is incredible. I may not have seen what you've pulled off at the Zeroth level of it, but I've seen enough work from other enchanters to estimate how big the jump in your proficiency is going to be. You've got the talent. Hell, figuring out however the rings work alone, I was planning on keeping the shop closed today for some other stuff, but one of the things added to the list already is you explaining how your ring system works. Actually, that reminds me, I got a request from Ibru asking for you to submit a report on the blending enchanting system you use, as well as one on ritual magic for the Mages Guild to access since there's not too many detailed works on it. You should submit one for the ring system too, as well as how you've combined the 3. I'll be heading to Craftsman's Tower in a month or 2 for some war prep. If you have them done in time, I'll drop them off for you. It was a casual statement, but a reminder that Falk, Sonia, and Thera all intended to fight made his stomach drop, and his teacher could see it. "You all right, boy? It just hadn't occurred to me that you'd all be planning to fight," he admitted after a moment of hesitation. "Honestly, I'd been thinking it doesn't involve me at all. Like, obviously my human friends are gonna have to, but that's their trade-off for getting a life of luxury before it all goes down, and after too if we're lucky. The only real benefit to being ignored by every place in the world is I have 0 expectations on me to do anything, you know? And even if I did, I doubt there'd be anything I could do." He gave voice to the feelings that had been sitting in him ever since he'd heard what Sonia and Thera planned to do, feelings that were eating at him. He didn't know what he was supposed to do, but knowing the people he cared about would be throwing themselves into danger, it didn't feel right to do nothing. Falk, seeming to empathize with him, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. I'd been planning on talking to you about this a bit when you got back anyway, but none of us have any expectation for you to do anything, boy. We all know your circumstances. Nobody could fault you for not wanting to go above and beyond for the world. Maybe, but since I'm currently a sucker trapped on it like everyone else, along with all of you, doing nothing at all doesn't feel like it will cut it. Then come with us, his teacher simply said. At least for the first wave, my role isn't as hands-on as you might think. There's this experimental weapon. Well, it's a bit hard to explain if you don't see it, and I've only worked on the parts they requested and ordered from me, so I don't have the finer details either. But I'm going mostly to help make sure it runs right. With Sonia and Thera there, they'll maybe be acting as guards. Well, maybe Thera will handle some long-range attacks as well, but either way, we'll be in the thick of things, but not quite in as much danger as anyone else, and I know Ibaru would be thrilled if you were willing to join up to help too. The more folks around with awakened crafting-type skills, the better the odds of it working without a hitch. Was that what he wanted? To throw himself to the edge of the battlefield with the rest of the people he cared about? If he was to be completely honest, the answer was no. For as many near-death experiences as he'd suffered through, he didn't think of himself as a person who would go seeking them out, and yet the alternative was worse. The idea of the people he cared about fighting far from him when it could mean days or weeks passing not knowing if they were alive or dead, he wouldn't be able to stand it. All right, I'll go help out. You said you're leaving for it in a month-ish. But that's just some prep. I'll be back soon after. The main time I'll be down is for the last month before the portals open up, so we'll head out then. Okay, sounds good. Falk could tell even as Ben agreed that his apprentice still felt conflicted, so he decided to distract him with the best news he had. The original reason he'd planned on keeping the shop closed for the day was waiting as he went to pull out an unmarked crate from the back, thinking how surprised the boy would be to learn what it contained, and opened it up, revealing the bones within. In the end, though, it was he who was shocked when he watched Ben's eyes light up before he'd been told what they were. As the boy spoke up, "God bones. That reminds me, Falk. What's it mean to be a contender?" His teacher didn't know how to react about either part of what his apprentice had just said. If he'd had to make an assumption, it would be that the boy's god had told him about them ahead of time, and that his niece had mentioned him being called that in all faith, but it didn't lessen the shock. "I suppose Thera told you I was one, but that's my business, boy. Maybe I'll let you know in the future." Thera did mention it, but only after Analia called me one. "I was told to ask you about it." "What? That's impossible, even for you, boy. Show me your card." Ben handed it over, not having any real inhibition about showing it to his teacher. He'd planned on updating Falk about some of the changes to his status anyway, and he watched the emotions shift across the Yeti's face as he went through just how many there were before his eyes widened with realization. "So you're the one who killed the forbidden gods, then?" "It's a bit of a long story, but yeah." Falk groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose as he did. He thought that there might come a day when he needed to have a real talk with Ben about the skills he possessed, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. "All right, catch me up while we work later. As for what it means to be a contender, it means you're someone with a 9th-level awakened skill, a contender for reaching the 3rd tier. It comes with some benefits, though given you're a contender to gain a 3rd-tier sacrilege skill, I wouldn't recommend taking any of them. Even if there'd only be a few people in the world who would know about it, I could see it easily putting a target on your back. If you ever manage it with a proper skill, then we can go into details about how it might help you." He was happy to take all of that at face value, if alone for the fact that he'd gotten to learn another detail of his teacher's status. "So you have a 9th-level awakened skill?" "And that's all you're getting from me. Now wipe that grin off your face and let's get to work. When these bones were sent to me, I was told that your god would pass on what sort of weapons they would be used for. We've got plenty of time to finish them, but I want to get started." "Wait, we don't just get to play with them?" "Of course not. Are you insane? There's 2 skeletons here, and I was told we both get to use a small piece to experiment with that we can do what we want with if we don't accidentally destroy them, but otherwise everything is being made with specific people in mind." He couldn't help but deflate a little at that. Even if he was sure it would still be plenty fun to work with it all, But there was still one idea he wanted to test, a single one that he was sure the gods wouldn't be too mad about and had the potential to be exceptionally useful too. Okay. Give me a minute first. Hey Myriad. You around? This is great, but I have an idea I want to test. From everything you've told me, it shouldn't damage the bones as a whole, but you'll probably need to check with the other gods for me. Also, if it works, I want a third. You know how you told me how the flesh and blood of the creatures could be used for potions to permanently strengthen someone? I think I can make something similar with the bones without any loss for what would be used for weapons. Not telling. If you or the other gods want to know, I need agreement first. If I explain how, I lose my ability to bargain. Besides, a third is nothing when you consider that there's 3 other skeletons that could be used for this too, and it might not actually work. Consider this a payment for the fact that you'll all be able to use this in the future the next time a god dies. You're the best, Myriad. So, what's the spell you keep feeling the need to distract Ben from while you're casting it on him? Sonia asked offhandedly as they walked to the clinic. I'm not trying to distract him. I just don't know how to bring it up. It's kind of just a general health spell. It's fine, Thera admitted, still embarrassed to be caught by her aunt in the act so soon into doing it. Sonia just stared at her, eyebrow half-cocked as she waited for more until Thera gave in. It's a spell to increase a person's lifespan. I kind of spoke about it to him already. It's fine. I want to be casting it on you and Uncle too if you'll let me. Sonia hadn't known what she'd been expecting, but it wasn't that. She hadn't even known such a thing was really possible outside of rumors, the spell being a secret of the soul mages to keep them from being inundated with requests to serve the rich or powerful in the same way. More than that though, it was clearly an extension of her niece's insecurities dealing with loss. I don't mind you using it on me if you want, and you'll need to talk to Falk about it, but if you're doing something like that, make sure you do more than just kind of talk to Ben about it, alright? She knew her aunt was right, and she didn't actually expect him to turn her down. But in her head there was the small what-if nibbling away at her thoughts. If he found out and was unhappy, she could always ask for forgiveness. It felt so much harder to ask for permission. No, Auntie's right. I'll talk to him when I'm home later. It was just another bit of stress. She kept telling herself not to think about the future, but finding out something like that was even possible made that goal all the harder. Instead of just ignoring the limited amount of time she had with the people she loved, she could actively work to extend it, though it only made the fact that their time was temporary stand out in her mind all of the more. Pushing the thought to the side for the time being, she walked through the clinic with her aunt once they arrived. Making her way to the office of the clinic head, Drari, who was already there, collapsed on his desk with his paperwork. Oh, Sonia, thank goodness you're here. And with a guest? Please tell me this is a potential new hire and not more work. More like the return of a part-timer. Thera doesn't need her cloak anymore. Though she still can't touch people. We were hoping you could pass that along. Hearing that, the man's face was a wash of relief. Oh, it's so good to have you back, Thera. What are the odds I can get you to do a few more shifts than usual? So many of this town's adventurers and even common folk have been pushing themselves to try and gain any skills and levels they could ever since the invasion points came down. We're all that's keeping all of these idiots from getting themselves killed. He sounded like he was on the edge of a breakdown by the end of it, and she couldn't stop herself from feeling some guilt from being gone so long, even if she was considered more of a part-time helper than anything, with her work as an adventurer being her focus. Drari had always been good to her, so she wanted to do what she could, and she did have one bit of immediate good news to offer. Sure, today I was hoping to end around my regular time since I just got back, but I don't mind doing a bit more until whenever I leave town again after. Also, I should probably let you know I awakened my life magic. What? He looked to Sonia, expecting it to be some sort of cruel joke at his expense, but her aunt just nodded happily as they both watched the man before them almost give out in relief, months of tension leaving him at the thought that he and his employees might actually get a break. I can't get over how pretty you are, Drari's daughter Aso told Thera as they made their way through the town. The harpy heritage of her mother's side gave the girl an attraction for sparkling things, and Thera's hair and eyes fit the bill perfectly. Not to mention how much you got done today. I thought Dad was actually going to cry. Can Dragonutes cry? Huh, I've never actually seen Dad do it, so I don't know. Still, if he can, he definitely would. This is the earliest I've been able to finish up in weeks. Thera coming back with an awakened skill had been an absolute blessing for the clinic. She'd always been able to do good work while there thanks to her mana pool, meaning she didn't need to take any breaks to regenerate her stock, but adding the explosive level of control she'd gained had changed things entirely. Forget staying late most days to help out now. She and many others in the clinic had left earlier than usual from how fast they were able to get each patient treated. Many of them feeling like they'd gotten a well-earned break after months of work and wouldn't stop singing her praise with Drari as they left early, only a few staying behind to handle anyone else that showed up for the day, leading to the two of them going out together. She liked Aso, and the girl in turn seemed to enjoy her company, and had no issue openly approaching her interests with Thera, namely, acting as an adventurer. They'd spoken about it plenty before she'd left, but now that Thera was in the first rank and with the potential end of the world on the horizon, she was hoping to get some actual help and pointers, and having no other plans than training her earth magic, she agreed easily, happy with the prospect of having some company. Before they could go, though, the girl needed some basic equipment, at least for the bare minimum, so they both went off to her uncle's shop. "Looks a little closed," Aso said, seeing the sign out front that Thera ignored. "Ben's in there for sure, and I'm certain my uncle was going to be too. It should be fine," she said, knocking on the door a few times until Falk opened up for them. "Ah, wasn't expecting you, Thera, and—" He looked at the other girl with his niece in curiosity as she spoke up. "Aso, I'm her friend from the clinic. Hope I'm not bothering you." "Friend, huh? Never a bother," Falk told her as his look of curiosity turned to a happy smile at hearing that. Come in. It's gonna be a little warm, 'cause of what we're doing, but hopefully it's not too much of a bother." She paid no mind to the warning. It was a smith's shop after all, it was always warm, but neither of them had expected to be hit with a wave of it, as they found the shop had been completely rearranged to give enough space for the strangest of setups, as a large cauldron was being heated in the middle of the store while Ben stirred its contents, all of the steam that came off it being funneled into a series of pipes, making it cool and condense into a different large container off to the side. "Is that your not boyfriend I've heard so much about?" Aso asked teasingly. "Wait, am I not your boyfriend anymore? A heads up would have been nice." Aso stared at her expectantly, hearing the response, and she tried not to blush, already feeling like she was going to regret the two meeting. "He wasn't when I left. He is now. Can we drop it?" "I want details later," the half-harpy said before casting her eyes around the shop as Thera focused on Ben. "So what exactly are you doing with all of this?" "Long story short, making a divine bone broth. I'll explain more at home later. For now, what brings you guys here? I honestly expected you'd be stuck late at the clinic from how you were talking before." She managed to heal everyone after only a few hours and kept the stress of being understaffed from killing my dad, Aso answered happily, picking up a sword at the side and swinging it around in a display that made it very clear she had no clue how to use one. "But we're here to get her some equipment," Thera explained. "She's interested in being an adventurer, so I thought I'd do a quest or two with her today until she finds a party she can work with, and there's nobody better in town to ask about equipment." "Flattery will get you everywhere, Thera. What sort of skills does she have, and we'll figure out what she needs." Ben took her to the side, showing Aso a collection of armors and weapons suitable for a beginner as Thera whispered to her uncle. "So when he said divine bone broth, he didn't mean what I think he did, right?" "He definitely meant that. Sounds like you both had quite the adventure." It was 90% stress. They continued to talk as Aso was set up, catching up on all they'd missed in each other's lives in that time before the two came back. Aso wearing a light leather armor with some areas reinforced with thin sheets of metal, a small staff in hand, and a large knife on her hip, looking positively giddy as she spun around. "What do you think? It looks good, but I'm a little surprised Ben didn't pick something, I don't know, more extreme." "Hey, I picked out what I thought would match her attributes and skills," he said in his defense. "Too much metal armor would weigh her down when she's not used to it. The leather with a bit of extra support is enchanted to have all sorts of extra defense on it that should be able to take far more than you'd expect. Actually, I should really set you up with some since you don't need to be cloaked anymore, Thera. But we can worry about that in the future." Otherwise, the staff is perfect for both light and fire spells, and the knife is a good enough quality that in an emergency she can run her fire magic through that for her attacks. What do you think, Falk? Looks good, boy. I'd say you have her well set up. So how much do I owe you then? She asked, looking at everything she was wearing. Even if she wasn't crazy about her work helping her father at the clinic, it paid well, but she got the sense that the quality of everything she had on her wouldn't be on the low end. Falk though waved that worry off. Nothing you're wearing is exceptionally better than anything else we sell, and since you're a friend of Thera's, I'll cut you a good deal. Hey, since I'm dating her, does that mean I can squeeze any benefits from you too? He asked his teacher, batting his eyes at him. Boy, when you're in the shop you're my apprentice before you're dating my niece, so focus on your work. Don't want anything going wrong with your soup. Fine. Fine. Once paid, the two of them left for the guild. They're nice, Aso told her happily. Why don't you ever bring them by the clinic? Because Uncle works full-time and my main goal is making sure Ben needs to spend as little time there as possible. After he finished boiling the bones, getting everything he'd needed out of them, he left them to the side to dry out as he admired what he'd collected. Having it well boiled down, there was a bit less than 50 liters in the cauldron, and of it, he would be getting 10. No good greedy gods talking my pay down to a fifth. And yet, I will. At the very least, it wasn't all bad. He'd made sure to capture and save all of the steam as it boiled off, and he doubted the gods would care too much about that, especially when it likely wouldn't work for anything, at least not to the scale of what he currently had would. He would boil all of that down further, but for the time being he focused on making the potions, only doing minor modifications along the way. From what his god had taught him, they were shockingly simple to put together in the end, only needing a few rarer components to make them as efficient as possible, letting the drinker get as much benefit as they could. Even if it wasn't refined, it was likely to yield a benefit for the consumer anyway. That was how valuable the body a god died in was. Which makes this almost certain to work. With that, he got to work, continuing to use the cauldron as he did, adding the ingredients Falk had prepared and placed to the side. The first of which being mithril, his teacher using his earth magic to force it into a solution to let it be added to the broth, followed by the main replacement he'd needed to make. Back when he'd succeeded in making Thera a staff that wouldn't break from a dryad's tree, at least before he'd disappeared for months, he'd hollowed out its core in the process, saving the shavings from that in a box with all of his other odds and ends he'd been unwilling to part with, and they'd finally be playing a part in his work. Having been boiled almost as long as the bones, the wood fibers broke down, letting all of it be blended into a paste before it was mixed in as well. Given just how inherently magical the trees it came from were, there was a good chance it would have actually been more useful than the original plants he was recommended, but if he was wrong, it wasn't the end of the world. It was after that the ingredients became significantly more common, changing from materials that were meant to hold some inherent magical effect to match the bones to ingredients to improve the body's ability to absorb the effects of the potion to the fullest extent. Ingredients that were admittedly on the higher end of the spectrum in potion making, but still things they had on hand. He stirred it all, each of his minds focused on every variable. When each ingredient went in, working the temperature of the mixture, making sure it was always at its most optimal mixing speed and more. Everything was for the good of making the greatest potion he could with the skills he had, and once he was sure it was done, all that there was left was testing if it worked. Taking more care than he ever had before, he carefully filled bottles one by one, making sure not to spill a single drop of the liquid as he went until he had 40 identical ones. So that means we get to keep 8. Okay, that works. Falk, I'm going to see how it works out for the liquid we collected in the other pot. Want to hide the rest away somewhere? Nobody will find it till the church representative gets here to collect it all. He couldn't help but be a little worried about it. Each bottle was invaluable if it would work. How could anyone put a price on pure power? Not to mention that if one of them broke, there was a non-zero chance one of the grumpier gods up there would call foul play and try to use it as an excuse to throw him into the infinite hells. No use worrying about that. Let's just finish this up and head back. He wanted to see if his idea would pay off more than anyone after all. Welcome home, Ben. Sonia called from the kitchen where she and Thera were preparing dinner. I wasn't expecting you so early. I was feeling impatient to test something since I knew you were planning on being home early. Also, I brought a guest. Hope you don't mind the intrusion, Fawk said, giving his old friend a wide smile that she returned. Never. I'll make an extra side. Join us for dinner. Might not be super necessary, Sonia. You probably won't be the most hungry after this, Ben said, lifting his crate full of potions that she completely lacked the context for. She shot him a questioning look, not understanding just where he was going with it. Did you pick something up on the way? Yeah, there's no easy way to explain this, so I think I'm just going to rip the band-aid off. So long story short, I made some potions from the bones of some gods and need you to drink them. It will probably be fine. What? She asked, no idea how she was supposed to even begin reacting to that. I'm basically certain it will be fine, don't worry, he reassured. I had to modify the recipe a bit, but considering what it is, it's actually shockingly flexible. Pretty sure that wasn't the part Auntie had an issue with Ben, Thera said, far from surprised by the turn of events since she walked in on him making them earlier. What do they even do? Oh, an excellent question. Everything. He let that hang for just a second, enjoying the shocked looks the statement got as he went on to explain in greater detail. I'm told they'll permanently raise your attributes, as well as help with your growth rates in all areas. If there was anything wrong with you, I'm under the impression they'd help with healing too. But that's more of a side effect than a goal. Anyway, drink up, he said, taking out the first bottle and trying to force it into her hand. No, not anyway, she said, stepping away from his hand. Ben, that would be so clearly wasted on me. If you're not using them yourself, then give them to Thera. Auntie, I agree with Ben here, you should take them. No, why? Ben was happy to answer it, having put in plenty of thought before he'd decided he'd be giving them all to her. Sonia, you're important to me, and the fact that you're planning on fighting on the front line scares me. Thera has as much mana as a town of people, and I'm sure you know how powerful Fawk is. Meanwhile, I have 20 job bonuses and frankly don't really need most of my attributes to grow more for my work. The only thing I really want to improve is my mana and vitality, and I have other ways to do it, he explained, showing off his new bracelets. You don't have any awakened skills. I want to give you whatever edge you can get. She wanted to keep arguing. Using anything like that would have been a huge waste for her when it could go towards someone who could put it to better use, but she could see that she'd be getting none in the room on her side as she gave in, staring at just how much he had there for her to drink. Fine, she said in defeat, even if she did feel it was a terrible idea. But do I need to drink all of those tonight? I don't think I can. No, only 8 of these are yours and just drink 2 a day for the best results. The last 2 probably won't actually work since they were made from collecting the water that boiled off, but 1 for Fawk and Thera each. Oh, but if you could all make a note of your status before you drink them and compare them again in the morning, and at least let me know how much your attributes have changed, I'd appreciate it, so I can keep whatever gods want to know happy. Sonia took the first bottle, giving it a hesitant smell. Ben was right that she likely wouldn't be hungry after. It was a lot. At the very least, it didn't smell bad though, and she took her first hesitant sip, pulling back in surprise as she did. Is this soup? Technically. Don't worry about it too much. If it doesn't taste bad, then that's all the better. While it wasn't great, she'd been expecting far worse from a potion and continued to drink away as Ben put the rest of the potions to the side, trying to hand the 2 he didn't have much faith in to Fawk and Thera, being rejected on both sides. Ben, if you don't drink that, I'm pouring it down your throat. And I'm holding you down for it. Guys, come on, I don't need them. Boy, you just told me you're joining us during the invasion. Even if we won't be as in the thick of it as others, we'll be on the front line. You need any strength you can get. Wait, what? Thera asked, her eyes widening to hear such a major choice spoken so casually. She'd fully expected he would at most be off preparing and maintaining weapons. There was no reason for him to be anywhere near that level of danger. He was able to pick up on her feelings easily enough, but decided to talk about it later. He wasn't any happier that she was planning on being so close to that sort of danger either, but it was something they'd need to talk about eventually. So for the time being he gave in to their demands, opening the first potion and began drinking. After they downed the potions and all of them enjoyed what they could of dinner, Fawk went home while Sonia went to sleep early, exhausted from using the extra hours she'd had from her shift ending early to exercise. and Ben took the time to do the dishes since he hadn't helped prepare dinner, right up until he felt arms and tail hugging him from behind. "Hey," he said warmly, having a good idea where this was going. "Hey," Thera said back, her face pressed into his back. "You know, I'd be a lot happier if you stayed in Stonewall when everything begins. Or maybe Analia. That would be a lot safer even with an invasion point on its doorstep and Mom would look after you. And I'd be a lot happier if you would too. Same with Sonia, same with Falk. I can't do nothing when everyone I love is planning on walking into danger, Thera. You could though. Ben, whenever anyone's born on this world, one of the first things they're taught is that there'll come a day when we need to fight. You were just selfishly dragged into it and basically abandoned when you weren't immediately useful. You shouldn't die for this world. Hey now, don't go killing me off yet," he told her gently, a light chuckle in his voice before he took a more serious tone. "Thera, no matter how I ended up here, what matters is this is my home now. There's so many people who've helped me, even if I did have a rocky start, and so many people I care about. I won't just do nothing when you all insist on fighting. I want to do what I can. MMH. She held him tighter, not letting go as they stood there in silence until she changed the topic, at least as far as he could figure. "Would you mind if I started practicing my magic on you?" "Oh, yeah, sure. Go for it. You should probably ask what I'm planning on doing, you know? Why? I trust you, and you've already practiced plenty of life magic while healing me in the past. Is this something I should be worried about?"
No.
"I don't think so. I hope not. Lifespan enhancement, it sounds like it can potentially add a few years to a life if it keeps getting cast, and it's a complex spell to use, so it's good practice for me. Also, I just want to." That tracks. He knew Thera worried about dealing with loss, and this was a request with no downsides for him. It would make his girlfriend happy, and it would give him a few extra years. Cast away. As a huge fan of being alive, I've got zero issues with it. She loosened her grip and let him turn to face her, her hands gently cupping his face as she carefully cast her spell, feeling a little more relaxed as she did. Once done, she leaned up and gently kissed him before they both parted for the night. "Aw, Ben, you can be such a good boy when you want to be," his god cried, interrupting his lessons with Hillary. "I'm going to make sure to show what you said to Thera to everyone. That should be plenty to show that you're not actually as bad as you act. Or you could not, that was kind of a private moment, you know. Not that I actually have any of those. I wonder if I can use my sacrilege to keep the gods from watching me in general. If you aren't planning on doing anything bad, then I wouldn't try it," Hillary told him. "If you can, it's likely to make you seem more guilty to the gods that don't like you, and it might sway some of the neutrals too. More important than any of that, how do you think the potion turned out?" Sonia seemed to feel an immediate effect, which isn't exactly shocking. "As for me, no change in my status yet, but I think I felt something. Of course, that could just be the placebo effect. I'll know for sure in the morning." "Good," the goddess said approvingly. "It was a good idea after all. It's sad that it's wasting time, but the other bones are being sent back to the alchemist since it would be good to raise the power of a few more mortals in the end. I have to say, though, spending your whole share on that one woman is ridiculous. Everyone else who's getting any will be getting 1 or 2 bottles only. What can I say? I want Sonia to be okay. Hell, I want them all to be okay, but there's no way Falk's attributes are low if he's a contender, and as much as I care about Thera, it's hard to worry too much about powering someone up who has nearly 500,000 in mana, at least in comparison to the far more humble one Sonia has. It wasn't like Sonia's attributes were bad originally. In fact, when he'd found out what they were, he had to admit they were shockingly good. All of them were in the mid-300s with the exception of her mana, which was low 500s. She was an all-rounder in that sense, her mana only being so much higher than the others because she'd given up the combat she'd been doing when she was an adventurer to focus on her magic. And with how much the clinic relied on her, she'd been able to see far more practice than she'd likely expected when she'd first joined. He couldn't deny that he wished that he'd had some other way to quickly raise his stats, but it wasn't like he was completely lacking in ideas on that front either. So what are the odds we can get another god to descend on the world? We could open up a vein, get a couple awakened life mages to keep them safe, and just keep shoving food down their throat so we can keep collecting blood for potions. Hellori looked horrified by the suggestion while Myriad just came across as exhausted as he spoke to the goddess in his realm. I'd appreciate it if you didn't spread around the fact that my apostle is like this. What? I think it's a pretty darn good idea. Would you be happy if someone suggested you be made into potions? Hellori shot back. If I was going to survive basically unharmed, then yeah, it would be fine. Ben, the gods need to save their strength. The only reason 3 descended when they did was because of just how big of a deal what happened with the demons was. Nobody's coming down to bleed for you. Lame but fine. I have other ideas anyway. Why does your mind feel like it's actively trying to hide whatever they are? The cube questioned. Because you're being paranoid. Then what are they? Not important. He could feel the stress coming from his god but was sure it wouldn't be an issue, at least not a big one. He couldn't deny what he was planning was arguably unethical, but there was a better-than-not chance that it would yield some benefits, and he was equally as sure that some gods would get a kick out of it. Still, he did his best to change the topic. He'd need to get Thera's help for buying some of the equipment for it anyway, and both gods would see soon enough. Anyway, Myriad, Falk asked me to do a write-up on ritual magic. Go over the finer details of it with me again, while I'm practicing Hellori's language with her. Would you? It felt like more and more was falling onto his plate. Not that he minded. As his mind skills kept growing, the more he had to do to keep himself busy the better. Waking up earlier than he needed to, the first thing he did was open the archive to spend an hour in it. An hour in real time that was, but with the massive time dilation effect upon it, it was more like he was spending 4 days there. It was an interesting experience. So long as he wasn't hungry or tired before he went in, he wouldn't grow to be as the time passed. The state of his body having more to do with the real world than anything else, and it gave him all of the time he needed to focus on any interests that didn't involve physically training his skills. He spent hours upon hours writing things and ideas out any time he went in there. From hundreds upon hundreds of ideas for potential enchantments to a dictionary and a translation guide for the language Hellori was teaching him, and of course what little he could of his god's ridiculous language to try and help him remember and process it, even if he didn't think many of the sounds could be properly expressed in the characters of this world or his last. I suppose I could make my own to try and capture them, he mused. It would probably be easier than learning whatever sort of writing system Myriad would use. We'll put that as a maybe. It was an interesting idea, but one he could fiddle with using only a single mind. The majority of his thoughts were going to be devoted to the same thing that had been stealing every bit of his interest more and more as time went on. The summoning spell. Back while they were with Vividus, one of the things he'd painstakingly done was trying to recreate it within the archive, drawing out every single bit of it by hand using the pen provided, going back to Myriad's realm a number of times to try and make it look as close and perfect as possible, and he'd been pleased to say that he'd done it. Its already huge scale had to triple in size due to the limitations of the size he could work in, but he was confident it was nearly close to perfect, and he felt he'd actually learned a bit more about it in the process, even if it wasn't enough to be immediately helpful. Above any small clue on how different parts worked together, though, came a renewed appreciation for just how ridiculous what the gods had been using without any real care for how it worked truly was. He made piles of notes within the archive, theory crafting on ways to apply the smallest of sections to his enchanting without distorting the original purpose of the structure, and came to accept one inescapable conclusion. The way he typically used magic was equal parts art and science. There were rules within the framework his enchantments were built in, but as long as he understood what he was doing, there was plenty of room to play around. That summoning spell was different. It was a precision piece of magical engineering. He was nothing more than a caveman trying to comprehend a rocket before it. But anything can be learned given the time and resources. Time? He had a mythic item that stretched out what he had beyond his wildest dreams. Resources? He was rich from his patents and happy to throw money at the problem if it would help. He refused to believe the problem in front of him couldn't be solved. He'd just keep doing the one thing he could, chipping away at it till something gave. When he left the archive, he checked his card, seeing far better results than he'd expected from his leftover potion, his attributes growing by 10 all around, with his regeneration rates growing by 1 each, and felt plenty satisfied as he looked at it. He passed on the results to his god and Hellori, the latter of which he chatted with in his head about exactly how it had turned out as he prepared breakfast for everyone, waiting for them to get up. The smell of his cooking acted as its usual siren's call, and as both women sat down he placed plates in front of them, looking at Sonia, filled with expectations. All right, I'll check, just a moment," she told him, pulling out her card as he and Thera went to lean over her shoulder, all of their eyes bulging from the result, even if it was in line with what Ben expected. "So your stats are up almost 50%. Incredible," he muttered. "Really makes me hate Galwax all the more since his stupid trial only brought a couple of mine up by a third. But with results like these, it puts those potions in the middle of what it sounds like the other ones that were distributed would do. Plus, it will be neat to see if your growth will decay as you drink the rest. Or you too could have them," Sonia said, almost pleading as she did. They weren't wrong that it could help her stay alive if things got bad in the future, but there was something mildly horrifying about so casually drinking something that was giving results people would happily kill for. Ben, though, didn't budge. "I can grow the attributes I want to buy wearing my bracelets. If you want to share some with Thera, I don't mind, but I really think you're the priority here." "I'm not taking any. They're all yours, Auntie," her niece was quick to say, ignoring the small out Ben offered. "They're good for you and you're outnumbered." With how firm they both were, once again she accepted she wasn't getting out of it, resolving to just let Ben check her card without looking herself until all of the potions were done to ease the level of guilt so much unearned growth was giving her. With that done, they both went to get ready to leave for the clinic for the day, Ben stopping her at the last minute. "Hey, so I need a teeny tiny little favor, and I won't complain about how fast you want to fly in the cart for it." "I'm listening," she told him, perking up at the prospect. The entire time she'd been getting them home, only the day before he'd spent the whole time complaining about danger and a lack of safety features and how hitting anything at the comparatively slower speeds she was going for him meant instant death, even with nothing to hit in the sky. If he needed her to fly for it, that meant they were likely going to the gate, and she was sure she could cut the trip down to an hour or two if she went as fast as she was comfortable. "There's something I want to test out, but it means buying supplies from your dad and a few other things. I mean, I guess I could use some worse materials, but that would still mean waiting for them all to come in, and I want to see if what I'm thinking would work as fast as possible." I don't know," she told him, pretending to think on it. "You still owe me the best day of my life for my stupid title, and you haven't mentioned it once since we got back. How's the weekend sound?" "Excellent," she said happily, shooting him a dazzling smile that lacked any of the worry from their talk the night earlier. "I'll try to finish as early as possible. I want to get back on the same day." With that done, she cast her spell on him before running off to work as he did his best to contain his worry, thinking about the trip being shortened so much that it could be done both ways in a single day. "I definitely need to figure out a faster and safer means of transport," tossing that near the top of my ever-growing list. Once he was alone again, he went back to the desk in his room, pulling out 4 pens and a thick stack of paper to complete the tasks Falk asked of him. He needed to write a comprehensive outline for both ritual magic, as well as how he used enchantments, which would need at least 3 sections. He laid out 4 pages, taking 2 pens in each hand to take advantage of the ambidexterity that had merged into his unending crafting, while at the same time carefully lifting the other 2 pens to write by manipulating them through the aid of his material user skill. He'd be slower with his magic than with his hands to ensure it was legible, but it would be decent practice and would still save him a bunch of time by doing it. He began writing out all he knew of ritual magic, before reflecting on what to do about something minor he'd never considered for his enchanting. What to call everything. "Let's see, I usually just call the blending method the blending method, but since this is going to be its first time being written down and I feel like it has a good chance of being popular, let's call that one Myriadic blending and make sure to include its history as being developed between me and Myriad to see if that scores him some faith. At worst, it will spread his name around a bit, which I'm sure will keep him happy. Think I'll call the final system of merging them all together the Hef system for myself. I had to deal with way too much to make it, so it might as well have my name tied to it. That just leaves whatever to call the ring system. It wasn't like he'd invented it, so it felt strange to be the one to name it, but if he was going to give any credit, that meant naming it after Galwax, and there was no way he was going to do that for the god that had put him through so much. "Sorry, assface, but there's no way I'm letting a bastard like you have the fame, even if you're too dead to get anything from it. I guess I could just call it the ring system, but that feels pretty lame." Then what? Only one of his pens was still as he thought until he felt the perfect name come to mind as he jotted it down. A strong, spiteful smile painted across his face as he did. Bastard rings? Really, isn't that a little tasteless? His teacher asked him after flipping through the couple hundred pages of notes Ben had written, getting a shaky thumbs up in return. It's the ring system of a bastard, it works, Ben said weakly, still feeling the effects of buying what he needed to with Thera the night prior. The other option was ass-face rings, and honestly that just doesn't have the same ring to it, you know? You're not wrong, but it doesn't mean your first choice is good. Still, I get you went through a lot figuring it out, and I honestly think Ibaru will get enough of a kick out of it that he won't have an issue pushing it through. If anyone complains, just tell them I say that's the actual name, and I'm just trying to honor the last will of the god who made it by passing it on faithfully. Not one part of that was true. And only you and I know it. Shaking his head, Falk gave up, instead focusing on the god bones in his shop, dry and ready to be worked. Much to Ben's displeasure, he wouldn't be able to make many items with them himself. Falk was the better of the two of them by a large margin still, but it wasn't all bad news for him. He'd be doing some of the simpler work on them as well as the majority of the enchantments, and from what he'd been able to learn from his one sample piece he was allowed to practice on, he'd be gaining a positively insane level of experience from it. His current method already let him place significantly more enchantments than the standard weave method, and he could triple the quantity on something that was enhanced with a god's bones. So that was how the day went. Myriad in his head, letting him know who would be getting what so Falk could make it, while he took the items once they were cool enough to handle comfortably, applying enchantments in a way that would complement the wielder's skills best. It was long, difficult work, draining him of mana more than normal as he tried to get everything done as fast as possible without sacrificing quality. But as he looked at each one he couldn't deny it was worth it to take part in their creation, at least a little. Falk had told him in the past that it was ridiculously hard to get an item out of the rare ranking without applying enchantments to it, but anything made from the bones of a god would do. Each item that he was handed was listed as high ultra-rare in his eyes, with the only sad bit being that after his enchantments went down they were still in that same tier. He didn't have any illusions about it. He understood that the gap between high ultra-rare and low legendary was a massive one. A barrier an enchanter typically needed either multiple awakened skills or an extremely high level of one to break. And I can't exactly just throw my sacrilege on there willy-nilly to try and up its value. Even if it hadn't made it any higher yet though, that was likely to change when it got back into his teacher's hands as Falk added a few finishing enchantments to it to complement the ones Ben added himself. He could only imagine what the ones his teacher was going to enchant would achieve, assuming they would easily make it to mid-legendary, even if getting to high legendary wouldn't be a guarantee, let alone anything mythic. Now that he spent a bit of each day playing with the archive, he understood just how high of a hurdle that was. The fact that God Bones enhanced the power of enchantments on top of everything else is going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting too. Oh man. I just want to make it to legendary on my own so freaking badly. Both of them were completely absorbed by the task that they knew would take them weeks, knowing they'd likely never get the chance to use a material like that again in the future. But despite how much they both enjoyed it, his teacher put a strict end to the day. Aw man. But I can definitely go on longer, Falk. Nope. Something like this, we're doing it as right as we can, so we're ending early today. Oh fine, he said, giving in easier than he wanted to for the simple fact that he had other things to do, things he could potentially drag his favorite Yeti into as well. In that case, think you'd be free to give me a hand with something then? Depends, I guess. What did you have in mind? I need to buy a house. After I just want a hand building a greenhouse if you'd be up for it. Buying the house had been easy enough. With enough people having left Stonewall with the invasion, he had even been able to get one in the same area as Sonia's, convenient considering what he needed it for. The only reason he'd bought it at all was because he needed space for the greenhouse he wanted to build, not wanting to take up the entire backyard that Sonia had been training in with a project that might not even work, so after spending far too much for an experiment, he got Falk to help him set the whole thing up. Originally, he'd gone to Analia to pick up glass in the exact dimensions he needed, but since the material he used would all cost the same for the Great Earth Spirit to create if it wasn't inherently magical, he decided to go to the greatest extreme he could think of, having sheets of diamond produced since they were nothing more than rocks in Abris's eyes. Everything was shaped to the dimensions he needed, along with the fittings to put it together, so from there it all came down to assembly, as well as making the plant beds with plant magic enchantments built into them for the exotic ones he specifically went out of his way to buy, going through a few different gates to collect 5 different kinds of miniature, fruit-bearing trees. "I'll admit, boy, I was hesitant at first, but I see the appeal," Fox said approvingly. "Gardening's a nice hobby. Are you going to bring that one you got at Sonia's over too?" "Nope, keeping Frederick where it's safe, and this isn't exactly a hobby. Consider it both a long-term attempt at making more strengthening potions, as well as getting sacrilege to the 3rd tier. If this works, that is. All right, I'll bite." "How?" "Glad you asked. Give this a look." With all of the trees planted, he went to each of them, placing a thick metal ring around the base of each trunk, with 2 empty slots in each. One for a white mana battery, and one for a soul crystal. Specifically, the ones trapping the souls of each forbidden god. He hadn't been immediately sure if it would work. He'd made each of the rings to carry both the beast form skill, as well as a mental compulsion to be as relaxed as possible and a sleep spell, but he didn't know if the first would let the skill be carried out on a plant and if the second 2 would work on a soul that was sealed in a crystal, but at least for the first he got to see immediate results. The bark of each tree took on a slightly scaled look, yet not in the same way for each one, which he hoped was the skill taking advantage of not only the demon souls they contained, but the god's souls as well. It was a brilliant idea, at least as far as he was concerned. If potions could be made from bodies inhabited by gods, then he just needed to make a body he could keep taking from, with his mind going straight to plants. If it worked, then he'd have a permanent source of magical steroids, fresh for the taking. Falk, for his part, was less impressed with the ingenuity on display than he was with the theological implications. You're trying to farm gods? Forbidden gods, who happen to have put the world in an incredibly bad place. It's fine, right, Myriad? He says it's a fitting punishment. Well, I guess if your god is all right with it, Fox said, only a touch of hesitation in his voice. And we are using their bodies anyway, so I guess this is fine? Exactly. With that done, I think I'm going to set up some defensive enchantments throughout the place. It would probably be bad if anyone broke in. Worse if a crystal was taken. Don't even want to think about it, just make sure you put something down in case they start moving or something on the inside too. Don't want any evil walking plants going through town. Fair. Even if the ones he bought had no way of doing that sort of thing, he didn't want to find out how much the souls of gods and demons could do to change the structure of a plant if the mental compulsion he was trying to force on them didn't work. His teacher, seeming happy that Ben would at least take some sort of precaution despite the insanity of what he was doing, stayed to watch him work, chatting as he did. So, are you going to actually be using that house you just spent so much money on? I feel like Thera and Sonia might end up missing you if you just move out on a whim. That? I hadn't actually thought about it, I just bought it to have the yard. I guess I could use it to see about setting up some defensive enchantments throughout the house as practice to see how strong I could make it without destroying the place or needing too much rainbow mana crystal. Then I could set up the same for Sonia. If it works out, I'm sure there's plenty of rich and powerful folks out there who would pay a pretty penny for my services, so it might be a decent business opportunity too. Plus fun. Every time I've worked on a large-scale enchantment for a building, the purpose has been charm suppression. It might be some pretty good experience if I just cut loose with it. As Falk watched his apprentice ramble about whatever ideas he was having, he only grew concerned. The greenhouse was enough of a sign of just what sort of ideas his apprentice had when he cut loose. He didn't want to know just where his head was at enchanting an entire house. He just hoped he wouldn't do something as dumb as setting one off by mistake and getting himself killed. Looks like I was right. All right, guys, you can stop now. Ben told the 2 gods who were speaking in his head, spewing a stream of information about the plants in the world as he finished up a book on the same topic. Specifically, he'd been learning about plants insofar as how they related to his crafting and alchemy, wanting to see if that would level up both of his knowledge skills, and finding it did. Hellori sighed in relief as Myriad was quick to agree with the feeling. It was just to speed things along, don't worry. I'll try and improve my speed reading some more anyway. But first, I've got to focus on today. He had big plans after all. After plenty of time devoting himself to working on the Godbone weapons with Falk and tending to his new, ethically dubious garden, the weekend had finally arrived, meaning he had a promise with Thera to fulfill, and with that in mind he left his room to get started on it. Sonia had already left for the clinic for the day, and he knew Thera planned to sleep in a bit with how early she'd been going to help, followed by plenty of time spent hunting with Aso after, so he was going to use it to push his culinary skills to their maximum potential. She said she wanted the best day of her life. Let's see if I can make that happen. Breakfast was a priority, but his main focus was things that would be enjoyed later as he began on the last thing they'd be eating that day, dessert. He wanted to have a variety of flavors, but even with as good as he was, there were limits to how much he could make, so to get around that he decided on cupcakes. After making the initial batter, it was easy enough to separate out portions to add different flavorings to, as well as all of the fillings and frostings and creams that would go with them, ending up with so many combinations that he thought would work in the end that after they were complete no two were the same, even though he had over 24. Maybe I made too many actually? Well, it will be good to let Sonia have some, and who says there can't be dessert after breakfast too? Let's see. Thera seems to have a sweet tooth anyway, but a sweet breakfast followed by a cupcake might be a little too much. We have some meat and veggies that should go well with a light syrup, so let's go with those to start. Plan in mind, he began exactly that as he heard Thera beginning to move around, the smell of his cupcakes making its way to her and her stomach rousing her to get up and see just what was waiting in the kitchen. Morning, she said as she walked up behind him, placing her head on his shoulder. Her eyes closed in a futile resistance against her hunger to stay asleep. Morning. Give me just a minute and I'll have breakfast out. Sounds good. It smells fantastic. It will be. She grabbed her seat while he left the food to cook, grabbing something from the cold box to make drinks. Frederick was yielding berries year-round now, and while he enjoyed snacking on them as he worked, most went to the freezer if he ever needed them, in this case being boiled and mashed in a pot with some water and sweetener before straining to make a simple juice. Once done, he plated everything and laid it out for them, both digging in as the last bit of sleep left Thera. All right, this is definitely a good start, but you've got a long way to go before I'm over my title, she teased. In the weeks since she'd gained it, she found herself caring less and less, but she still liked the idea of Ben going all out for her enough that she wasn't going to drop it, and he was happy to anyway given how their first date turned out. Well, I've got one or two things that should entertain you, namely a new game. Come on. Ben. As much as I enjoy passing the time playing games with you, beating you has lost some of its magic. Ah. But you've never beaten me like this. Walking into the living room, the first thing she noticed was the square sheet of diamonds sitting on the table, same as the many others Ben had bought from her father, only smaller. In a way, it was horrifying having something like that laying around. While her dad could make it far easier than any magic material, he typically didn't for the sole fact that there was no real demand. What he made each day would be so much more useful and valuable that it would be a waste of his time and mana, though he would take an order for it if it came up. Because of that, though prices of the many magic materials had been dropping for years, the prices of precious gems had remained relatively stable. An equal quantity of mithril would still cost significantly more, but given the versatility of it, it made sense. A diamond sheet had value for being a diamond sheet, that was it. Ben took a seat, picking it up and placing one of his white mana batteries into it, seeing a light enchantment activate across it as it did while two small bars appeared on either side, as well as a thin line across the middle and zeros in each corner. Okay. You've got me curious, what's this? A video game. Although that's not technically right since nothing like video exists here. An illusion game then? A light game? I'm going to need to figure out a name for this when I file my patent. He'd created it more as a side effect of studying the summoning spell than anything else. Since he wanted to try and treat his magic more like engineering than the art and science it typically was, he'd looked for a structured approach to achieving that, which led him to this. Instead of his usual way of doing it, this was more a rigid set of the activation and cancellation condition spells that all existed around a few of his rings of magic, each going off when certain conditions were met to replicate the simple game of Pong. It'll start when we both run some mana through it. Grab your half on both sides to move the paddle left or right depending on which side you run your mana through, and once a ball appears, try not to let it pass by you. It was far more interesting than she'd expected when he'd said he'd made a new game, and her eyes were gleaming as she got her hands on it, ready to play. As it began, he kept one mind focused on the sacrificial enchantments on it, feeling pleased to see they were breaking so much slower than he expected. With what he had on there, he'd originally thought he might need to rebuild them every 10 minutes. But it seemed that the control she'd gained from awakening 2 of her magics had left her far better off than he would have guessed. It seemed like it would be able to go hours without any upkeep if she and Sonia ever wanted to play it when he wasn't around. News he couldn't be happier with as he put all of himself into the game. Even better, for a minute it looked like he might win too. He'd set up the game to be first to 5 points, and he'd quickly gained 3 at the beginning as Thera got her bearings. As with the Pong he'd played a handful of times in his past, it was made to move faster as time went on, giving him just enough of an edge he could take advantage of for his first few games, or at least he'd hoped. As the game sped up, he had his first miss, and it was all downhill from there. After Thera got tired of beating him, they took a stroll through town to get to their next destination for lunch, the local restaurant Thera liked, the one he'd rented out for her birthday, only this time she'd be enjoying it in a far more normal way with him as they took their seats. The tables around them filled by any random patrons who'd stopped for a meal as they placed their orders. They chatted as they waited, Thera's interest in the game they'd played leading her to probe him on what else his world had to offer as he tried to describe it all, thinking on what would or wouldn't be possible for him to replicate, at least in the immediate future. There were so many simple ones he was sure he'd be able to make without too much issue, but as complexity grew, so did the level of practice he'd need to achieve it. I don't think it was as helpful as I hoped it would be, but it was still fun, so I'll work on it a bit more in the future. He pushed those thoughts to different minds in his head as their meals arrived, both digging in, though Thera with less gusto as she stopped and stared at Ben. I can't believe this. I think you've actually ruined food for me. Like, this is good. But after getting to enjoy your food so often, I don't think I could go back to not eating it. So I've got you trapped. He laughed. The moment you tasted the full might of my unending crafting, I didn't even need to worry about confessing to you. You can't escape me now. Ha, I think it mostly means that whenever we go out I need to only order things you haven't cooked before so I have nothing to judge against. Also, you really should write down some of your recipes. I was thinking about that before too. I've replicated a bunch of recipes from my homeworld and I've just created a few from scratch too, so there's 2 volumes right there, and I'd be willing to bet the first one would sell at least a copy for every human on the planet. Probably plenty of people who'd just want to try it too. What do you think? I could call it Ma Ben's Big Old Book of Earth Cooking. I think you're not a mother. That's completely beside the point. He laughed as he thought about it. He didn't need to do it to earn more money, he had plenty of that already, but it might end up as a nice way to keep a bit of his homeworld alive, even if there ever came a time that humans were all but forgotten in the universe. At the very least, he thought it would be a good way to leave a mark from his race in a purely cultural sense beyond whatever any of his classmates achieved in battle. Well, that's just one more thing I can send off with Falk before he leaves. I've got some time, so maybe I'll work on getting a few more equivalents as well. Something to consider at least. With lunch done, the 2 of them wandered through the town after, enjoying the day and the sun while it was out before making their way back home. When Thera had told him she wanted to do this, she'd emphasized one point in particular, so he was happy to spend a few hours trying to manage it, failing miserably as he did. You are absolutely terrible at this, she laughed as she spun in his arms, trying to teach him the moves for a dance that had no need for a tail. I don't think we'll be getting you the skill today. Hey, don't give up on me so quick. It might happen. It really won't. All of those minds in your head, but you can barely use them to keep your feet moving right. You get points for being good with your hands though. It's like your top half and your bottom half are from 2 different people. Ha! If I can figure out a way to craft with my feet, I'll get better at using them in no time. For now though, should we start to end things and I can begin dinner? I've been marinating a roast since yesterday, and I can't wait to see how it turns out. One thing first, she told him, guiding his hands to her hips as she wrapped her arms around his neck. We can at least do some of your silly human dancing. With that they swayed to the music, Ben staring into her eyes as they sparkled from the light of his music player, and feeling the mood, began to lean in as she did as well, only stopping with the sound of the door opening. making Thera slip from his hands before anyone could walk in on them. "Auntie, you're home early," she called out before Sonia joined them. It was a shockingly easy day at the clinic today. Of course, having my mana more than triple what it was a week ago helped, so I was able to leave early for once. Though, am I maybe interrupting something? She saw Ben's music playing flying around the living room and her niece's blushing face. But Thera was quick to refute her. "Not at all. Ben was just going to start dinner." Okay. But if you two ever want some time to yourself, you can just let me know." Definitely should have let her know. "You don't need to worry about that, Auntie," she told her, casting Ben a look from the side. "All right. Well, if you're sure, I'll go clean up first." As she left, Thera leaned up, giving him a quick kiss before whispering in his ear, "Sorry. Hey, it's all good. Even if it ended a bit earlier than usual, would you say it was still a good date?" "An excellent one." In the heavens, the gods watched down on the world as they did all they needed to. Preparing for the war wasn't just something to be dealt with on their end after all. They needed to be sure their believers were doing their best as well, along with any mortals who'd been doing any work for them specifically. Of them, the most important groups were the ones who had gotten to reap the benefits that killing the forbidden gods had brought. By enjoying potions that immediately boosted one's stats so significantly, everyone who'd enjoyed one was made to work all of the harder for it, with gods and nations alike expecting to see a payoff for the investment. Of course, every Tier 3 skill user got to enjoy one immediately, then it just came down to which of the Tier 2 skill holders would get to partake of them as well, with many of the summoned making the cut by virtue of their already great power. For all the trouble the forbidden gods had caused with their choice, at the very least there was some good to be gained from it. Aside from potions alone though, there were also the weapons that would be gained from making use of the skins and bones that were left. Weapons that needed to be split fairly across each nation, not letting anyone gain more benefits than the others as various gods and rulers decided amongst themselves just who they would be made for specifically. And as the weeks passed and various orders were fulfilled, things began to calm down enough for each deity to stop restraining their people on one single thing: contacting the unaligned awakened craftsman, the Apostle Ben. It was uncommon for anyone who had made the jump to awakening a skill to not tie themselves to any nation for all of the benefits it would bring, and rarer still for those who didn't to be so publicly known for awakening. Joining anyone would lead to a level of wealth one normally wouldn't be able to get otherwise at their fingertips, when in return they'd be asked almost nothing. In the case of anyone with a crafting skill, the only real drawback being that the nation who supported them would have their work as a priority, with the potential to ask them to ignore the requests of others depending on various factors and international relationships. It was simply too good of a deal, with the only reason people hadn't flocked to him despite knowing he only had a vague attachment to Analia being that no god wanted to cause any distractions while the godbone weapons were being worked on. But even the ones who had voted to toss Ben into the infinite hells would want him if they could get him, and with most of the weapons almost done, they stopped holding their people back from trying to bring him into their fold, as other, less desirable intentions made themselves known as well. "Boss, I'm not sure about this," one imp spoke up amongst their group. "We've heard the rumors. This seems like a quick way to be ripped in half before being tossed into the infinite hells." A round of agreement went up amongst them all, but their leader was taking no objections, smacking each of them silent. "You can't just focus on rumors, you idiots, you actually gotta think a bit. The only part of this that's going to be true is that he's an awakened craftsman and that he completed the trial. The rest is just fluff that got added on as the story went around." "But they say he's an apostle, boss," one whined. "I don't want to learn firsthand what an eternity of torture looks like." "And he completed that trial," complained another. "There's no way he's weak enough for us. Let's just pick a safer target. Come on." Again, each of them, even those who stayed silent, was smacked as their boss ground his teeth, disgusted with their idiocy. "Listen up, you complete fools. The same things scaring you are enough proof that it's nothing more than rumors if you just think about it for a little bit." He took a moment, looking among them to see if any would get it, but only finding confusion in their eyes before he shook his head and explained for them. "Look, you're all worried about attacking an apostle, right? Right, right, right. Of course you are. 'Cause that would be insane. Nobody would do something like that, so there's no way he can be one if someone tossed him into that trial. At the very least, Anyone who did it would be smarter to off themselves before the gods could get their hands on them. You get it? I guess that makes sense, one muttered. None of them could imagine attacking an apostle after all for fear of the consequences. Surely nobody else would do it either, no matter how much they didn't like them. But what about the fact that he completed it? Another asked. That's no rumor. Sure, their boss allowed. But again, actually think a bit and the solution is obvious. This is a trial that people have been failing for centuries, as even the best warriors and mages planned all they could before attempting it, along with any other poor schmuck who was tossed into it like this guy. You want to know why he's the only one who's made it out? I'll bite, boss. Why? 'Cause it has to be a crafting trial. The eyes of his 5 underlings light up in comprehension at what their boss was saying. Everyone knew that crafting trials existed. One of the 13 tower trials was for crafting after all, but when one heard that it was a trial nobody survived, that potential simply slipped all of their minds, making everyone expect challenges of magic or combat instead of any technical skill like that. After having it spelled out to them, though, it seemed obvious. He could see the understanding in his underlings' eyes as he let himself smile, having that bit over and done with so they could focus on what was important. So, now that you understand that it's simple, we track him down, do a light break-in, take whatever he's got that looks valuable and sell it off. An awakened craftsman without a backing, it will be some quick and easy money. And if he doesn't have anything? Well, then things get a little messy, eh? But it's just a craftsman. We put him to work for a night, sell off whatever he makes when we get out, and if he's agreeable he leaves with all his bones intact. You're both sure of this? Volker asked the 2 Sobek with him. You don't have to join me in this. I can bear this sin alone. Don't be insane, his first companion told him as he shook his head. We need to make sure this gets done and right. The slippery bastard has done too much to our God to just stay still. We've all seen that abomination in front of the church and we know he's the one making it. Get rid of him, and even if more need to be supplied in the future, then at least the price and danger should drop. They all ground their teeth just thinking about it. The sight of the priests of their faith hanging out of a window to supply the floating statue with power, the sheer volume of damage the last statue had done to the first church of their God, with fear of it happening again keeping people from going as much to give their faith, all from the rage of a monster that needed to be put down. We both understand what needs to be done, the second companion said. Once he's put down, we're all prepared to give up our lives, if just to get a bit of revenge. Even if Eneth can never thank us for this, we do it freely for him. Looking at the 2 with him, Volker could only nod. We'll need to wait for when the time is right, but in the meantime do what you must to prepare. We want this to affect our God as little as possible, no matter how hard it might be. Remember, we do it for him. For Eneth. Damn it. It's not so bad since I won't need to remake my bracelets yet, but still that's gonna make it harder to train. Ah. Dang it, Myriad. Trying to think in your stupid language just raised my mental expansion level. Ben complained as he felt his head throb, both from feeling the change to his minds, as well as having spent so long trying to talk with his God exclusively in the language he was being taught. Don't be silly, Ben. Learning a new language wouldn't get you to the 7th level of the skill. No, learning a normal language wouldn't. I still feel like my eyes are going to bleed every time I work on yours. Well, you've almost got it, even if it is giving you problems. Though I've got to say, I'm a little offended that my own apostle had such an easier time learning the language of another god than my own. And now you're learning a new one from her before you've even mastered mine. That's because Hiloris are structured in a way that actually makes sense. As weeks of working on weapons with Falk went by, Ben never stopped practicing the languages he was learning in his head, and combining that with the fact that he was spending almost an hour of real time a day in the archive, it was more like he'd been practicing it for months. It had made learning the one Hilori was trying to pass on to him a breeze, even if his own gods would need more work if he was ever going to get it right. Still, it keeps my very full head occupied at least. At 13 minds right now, I need at least that much. See, it's fine, Myriad told him as he heard Ben's thoughts. If you really don't like it, then just don't do it. It's not like there's any need to actually figure out Galwax's language, right? The need is just my own satisfaction, but either way I need a break for now. Think I'll stop by the house to finish up before going to the shop a bit earlier than usual so time to wake up. Wait! Myriad stopped him. Before you go, there's something we really need to talk about. Sure. What's the emergency this time? The fact that you haven't gotten any true sleep since you delivered my statue to the Church of Aneth. What? That's all. Myriad. Buddy. My body's resting while I'm up here, so it's fine. It's basically the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing. Even if your body is fine, your mind needs to rest too. Combining real time with all of the time you've spent in the archive, it's basically been months of constant activity. That's not natural, Ben. Come on. I feel fine, so don't worry, he told the cube, trying to brush it off. If he was being honest with himself, he was beginning to feel a bit of constant exhaustion around him, but it wasn't to the point that it would be a problem. It was just another way of pushing himself. Who knows, maybe if I keep it up I'll get something like sleep or exhaustion resistance. That would be pretty cool. Or you'll get hurt before that can happen. I know you've been avoiding it, but I'm not saying this as your god but as your friend, Ben. Have a proper nap soon without coming up here. I don't care if you keep your mind active for a few weeks at a time between doing it, but this is too much. Too much as in maybe it would help awaken my focus? He asked, giving his god a curious look as waves of annoyance came off the cube. Fine, I will later when I have less to do or if I start feeling pretty bad. For now though, dash. The thought hung in the air as Ben pulled himself from his god's realm, waking up with a well-rested body, even if the minds it contained got none. Myriad asked him as Ben was busy installing a new lock on the house he'd purchased for making a greenhouse. Maybe, but it was fun, so cut me some slack. Hey, I'll have you know that this lock is a masterpiece. That's what makes it a masterpiece. Ben had never made a lock before, but he remembered enough videos on their structure from his world that it only took a little bit of experimenting to get it right, and from there he improved it with the thanks of his divine enchanting, giving each pin a different effect that would shoot out if anyone tried to pick it instead of using the key it went with. It wouldn't kill anyone with a normal level of vitality, but then he didn't actually expect anyone to try robbing him. It was more of a proof of concept than anything that he didn't want to see rotting in a box somewhere, even if it meant using a little bit of his white mana crystal to keep it powered at all times. Hey, I'll also have you know I'm very proud of that one too. The door handle was set up with a similar curse he'd occasionally put on weapons depending on what their owners wanted, making it so that only they could use them without falling ill or feeling pain. It was a bit of a legal gray area, but it wasn't like he would just stop practicing what he knew, and anyone that got something like that was always informed about the legality of distributing them, so as far as he was concerned it was fine. Anyway, enough complaining. It took a while, but it's all finally done. I'll run through everything I did with Sonia later, and then she can decide what she wants on her home. But for now it's off to the shop. Grabbing his bike, he pedaled there as fast as he could, eager to start the day. In the month they'd been working on the weapons, they'd used up one whole skeleton already, but the orders were finally slowing. They had one more to finish up that day and then expected that all of the remaining ones that would be coming in for the shop wouldn't happen till after the first wave as everyone evaluated how to act from there, meaning he'd have more time to focus on his own interests again. It was only as he arrived, seeing a light already on in the shop, that he got to know he wasn't the only one who had been looking forward to finishing up, as his teacher was already hard at work, making the dagger that was their final order to deal with. Ben was happy to watch as the Yeti was absorbed in his work, hammering the slab of metal into shape, filing and sanding it down till it was comfortable and working on its edge, making it as sharp as it could be as a smile stretched across his face, and he turned to Ben. Instead of just watching, boy, toss me that job crystal of yours, he said, well aware of Ben's presence as his apprentice did as he was asked. It was only a few moments before Falk tossed it back, looking extremely satisfied as he did. It's been a while. Forgot how good that felt. The Yeti laughed happily as Ben tried to take advantage of his teacher's good mood. That's great, congrats. So what did you take? Nothing you need to worry about, Falk told him, knowing exactly what he was trying to get. Instead, add your enchantments to the knife, so I can add mine and we can send it off. Ugh. Fine. He'd already known exactly which ones he was going to apply to it, so he pulled out his rings and got to work, blending, weaving, and shaping his mana until the enchantment was perfect, or at least as perfect as he could manage before handing it back over to his teacher. Excellent work as always, boy. Now just some finishing touches. His teacher turned away, applying what he needed to in a few minutes till it was complete. So much of what they'd been making for the past month had been products of their teamwork, and it was clear it had been elevating the final product. Falk was so used to working on things alone since others couldn't meet his standards, but having the boy with him was proving to be a blessing, with that very same boy taking to his hands and knees as he begged. Falk, I've been quiet about this for so long, but this is the last one, man. Please, we've got to test it out. I need to see what a legendary item can do. MMH boy. Look, I know you don't want me peeking at your status, so I won't look at what enchantments you've added. But not letting me see the results of my hard work is cruelty to your loving and devoted student. Hearing that, he could only sigh. Fine, but not in town. Put a sign up that will be opening late today and come on. Falk couldn't deny that if he were in Ben's position, he'd also want to see the fruits of their labor, but using a legendary item in the middle of town was just begging for problems. So instead they left, taking their time to walk to the woods and then go deeper in, ensuring that there was nobody else around who could potentially end up injured. Ben was all but vibrating with excitement as Falk got his attention, walking over to the nearest tree, and with what looked like almost no effort, sliced it through the trunk as they both watched it come down. It was obvious to see that Ben's mood fell from the performance. He'd been expecting much greater than that, and his teacher could read him like a book as he laughed. Boy, that's what it can do without activating any of the enchantments. You haven't seen anything yet. Like a switch was flipped, Ben was back to raw excitement. Every one of his minds focused on watching his teacher as Falk ran his mana through the blade and gave what looked like a half-hearted swipe in the direction of the trees nearby, not even close enough to hit any of them. But as he swung, what Ben could only describe as a pulse of mana came out of it, tearing through the forest in a flash as the trees around them seemed unchanged. Before he could ask what happened though, Falk spoke up as he walked over to the closest one. "Ha, well, would you look at that? We did even better than I thought for even that to go so well." He placed his hand against the trunk and pushed, the upper half of the tree sliding from its base with ease and collapsing to the ground with a firm thud, shaking the forest and knocking down everything else in the area that had been hit by the pulse for meters around them as Ben ran over to look at just what had happened. Examining the trunk, it didn't even look like it had been cut, the combined might of their enchantments more erasing the part where they were originally joined than anything else as he ran his fingers over the surface. There was so much he wanted to ask about, but as he looked at his teacher, only 3 words came out. "Can I try?" Once Falk put a stop to Ben's wanton acts of deforestation, they both began heading back to town. The shop would be opening later than usual, but given how often it was closed as its owner left to deal with different clients, that wasn't a big problem. No, the big problem was the unusually large crowd trying to make it into Stonewall since they'd been in the woods. A long line of carts trying to get in as the few guards on watch were busy alerting their supervisors of everything so that they could prepare for the unexpected influx of people. "Huh. Wonder what's happening?" Ben muttered as his teacher gave him a funny look. "Suppose you'll see in a bit. Well, whenever we get back in." Usually it was much easier to get in and out, but the road was congested and they had no choice but to wait as traffic moved along, until they finally made it back into the walls to get back to the shop, finding the streets still packed for the entire way. It was bothersome, but Ben was able to ignore it easily enough, devoting himself to his thoughts on the way back, his language and magic studies, reflecting on the summoning spell that was consuming his life by that point, and also simultaneously making and breaking enchantments across his 3 mithril bracelets for the skill and job experience. The only thing that stopped all skills and thoughts in their tracks was getting back to the shop and finding that it had been the final destination of not only them, but the town's unusual level of tourists as well. "Ugh. About what I expected," Falk muttered when he saw what was going on. "I guess I should consider ourselves lucky they waited even this long. You expecting guests or something? There for you. Don't forget which of us was outed as being an awakened craftsman. We're just lucky they waited for us to finish up our main work. Or maybe lucky isn't the right word for it, since with this many showing up at once, it seems more like they were told when it would be okay to arrive. What? They're all yours, so decide how you want to handle this. Just keep my name out of it. An entirely unsatisfying explanation given. Ben followed as his teacher pushed their way through the crowd, chasing away any angry looks from them with the Yeti's glare as he processed what he was told until they were eventually stopped by a drawn weapon. "Stop pushing through," a regal man in heavy armor told them. "It's first come, first serve. Blame yourself for not rushing here sooner." "Oh joy, I can already tell today is going to be fun," he thought sarcastically as he watched his teacher grab the blade of the sword pointed at him. "Is it?" the Yeti asked. "Well then consider pointing your blade at the shop's owner, a one-way ticket to the back of the line." The words weren't loud, but the sentiment carried as everyone close enough to hear focused in on the two of them. Word of Falk hadn't been spread as much, but many of those who'd come had at least gotten a description of Ben, finding him to be a match in an instant as shouts sprung up around them. We can offer dash. If you work for our country, a mountain of gold dash. Women or men, our church will provide dash. Consider yourself lucky to have the chance to dash. There could be no greater honor than joining us as dash. In the cascade of shouting voices as people pushed toward them, more and more trying to get closer in order to be heard, Ben slipped off one of the circular mithril bracelets on his arm, quickly making the best sound enchantment he could in the span of a few seconds, and held it up to his mouth to shout through it, having his words amplified to be heard by all as he struggled to contain his emotions simmering beneath the surface. "Quiet! All of you shut up and make a path, so we can get to the goddamn door." None of the crowd had been expecting to be taken over in volume to such an extent, but in their shock from the turn of events did as they were told, all of them parting to let Ben and Falk continue on as his god spoke up in his head. Some feelings was putting it mildly. When he understood what was happening, he couldn't escape the sudden rage filling him. When he'd arrived on the world, not one nation or faith had seen any value in taking him, but after all of his hard work in growing his skills without any of the support others were given, now they had the gall to try and take him for themselves. He didn't expect to feel such a visceral reaction to it, but all of his minds were burning with anger that he tried to keep from his face. "Myriad, how many of the people here are from groups that either didn't take me in when they had the chance, or whose gods either voted to toss me into hell or remain neutral?" He could hear the earnestness in his god's voice, Myriad's intentions solely towards not wanting Ben to end up in any sort of trouble from acting out. So in the end he agreed, trying to meditate with half of his minds to calm down as the rest were focused entirely on dealing with the situation, as he finally got to the shop door and turned to the crowd, pointing to a close man while the rest were still quiet and asking him a question for all to hear. "You, tell me why you think everyone is here." The man, looking like what Ben would describe as a rhino person if he had to, brightened at being pointed out like that and given the first chance to talk. "Why? I'm here to offer you the wonderful chance to work for Dash. I didn't ask why you were here. I asked why everyone was here," Ben told him as he cut him off. "What's a group like this doing in a town so far from a gate? What? I would assume we're all here to try and hire you for our nations," the man said, confused on where this was going but not giving up the chance to try and keep selling himself. "With the one I represent being Dash. Don't care. Listen up, all of you. Sorry you wasted your time, but I have no interest in working for any of you or your nations or faiths or whatever sort of group you represent. If that was your only intent, then you should start going back to wherever you came from. For those of you who want to make any orders from us, we can discuss it, however there's going to be some rules. First and foremost, form a proper line. We'll take one group into the shop at a time to discuss things, so stop blocking the entire street like this. Second, if any of you try to talk me into working with you instead of making an order, you will be kicked out. Third, if anyone tries to convince me to work for you after putting in your order will be cancelled and you will be kicked out. Finally, and most importantly, if any of you has the nerve to bother me at home as well as here, I'll be blacklisting both your home nations as well as whatever gods you serve. And if you all can't get yourselves in a proper line in the next 10 minutes, you can all get lost. I won't be talking to a single one of you. I hope that was clear." Without waiting for a response, he turned and went into the shop, dragging his teacher with him as he locked it behind him and slumped over. "Sorry, Falk. Hope that was okay?" "Aye, it's fine. Course, given the size of the crowd and the fact that there's likely more to come, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes days to go through them all, and who knows how much for the orders you'll be taking. I'll worry about that later." "Alright, in that case, don't actually start bringing them in at 10 minutes. We probably need to contact the guards and Cecily to make sure things run smoothly, so it might be an hour. Keep the shop locked up and I'll be back in a bit after talking to them." "Sounds good, thanks." As his teacher left, Ben slumped over on a desk, still dealing with his simmering emotions and the disbelief he'd have to put up with something like this. "Did I handle that okay for you? Well, let's just see what the future holds. I demand a crown. Something fit for my liege. It has to at least be ultra-rare in quality to be worthy of them." Ben felt his eyes flared from the sheer gall of the man. After kicking out the first 6 groups that had come in for breaking the rules he'd set, it seemed that the rest had understood he as being serious, and with both Falk and Cecily around to get rid of anyone that wanted to argue, the next 10 had actually managed to talk long enough for most of them to put in orders, with the majority being similar requests to what he'd made Amy, only for 2 or 3 different items instead of the 9 that she got. The current potential client, though, may not have broken any of his rules, but he was immediately getting on his nerves. "You'll demand nothing. If you have an item you want, I'll do my best to make it if you pay the price, but I'm not going to make something over and over again until it reaches the arbitrary rank you want it to have. Especially not for a shiny hat. If you can deal with the fact that I can guarantee you something within rare and will be making it to the best of my abilities like I do anything, then we can start discussing prices." "Price?" he scoffed. "You're receiving the honor of making this for Zula the 8th. Do you know how many would kill to be in your position?" "Then go to one of them," he said dryly. "It seems like negotiations have broken down, so get out already. I'm not making something for someone who doesn't even have the intention of paying." "Now you wait here, he started. But before he could finish, both Falk and Cecily had the man by the arms and tossed him out, closing the door behind them. "I can see you two are going to be having fun for a while," the guildmaster told them, looking as annoyed as Ben felt. "I think I'll have to report some of what I'm seeing to the guards later. Want to make sure our more unruly guests are actually leaving town." "Please do." He was trying to be polite for Myriad, but some of them seemed like they were trying to make it especially hard on him in the end. "Still, the sooner this is done, the sooner I'm free." Heaving a breath, he went to the door and invited the next group of 5 in, not caring anything about them but making sure to get a handshake from each, just like each other group he'd met. "Well, at least one of them has a new skill for me to copy. Not sure what a 7th level of mapping will do, but time to get it on a ring." If there was only a single thing truly good about what he was dealing with, it was the sheer amount of bodies he could enchant skills from guilt-free. Even if he still had yet to awaken Connect, every bit of experience counted, and he was going to make sure he'd get all he could from putting up with this. As had become all too common, Thera awoke from the sounds above her, cracking open her eyes to see the numerous spirits filling her room as a cheer went up amongst them when they noticed her eyes flutter open. "Princess! The princess is up! Hello again, princess!" Dozens of them, all speaking up at once to her, left Thera wanting nothing more than to close her eyes again, even if she resisted the impulse as she held out her hand. "All right, I'm sure you all know this by now, so one by one." The massive boost to her total mana and regeneration rate with Awakening 2 skills meant she could use her spirit empowering more often without worry, so she had no problem with doing it for them all. But the greeting was taking a mental toll. Gaining the title had been bad enough, but when the first group of them showed up afterwards only to immediately call her that, she thought she was going to have a heart attack. "Also, can you all please call me anything else?" She tried for what must have been the 10th time, only to be greeted with the same confusion they displayed each time she asked. "But what else would we call you? Thera? Earthkin? Anything really?" "MMH, no," they said with finality. "Princess is princess. I must be being punished for something." Still, for as much as hearing it so much was eating at her psyche, she wasn't going to stop helping them when it was so easy for her. So like any other time they'd come, she just did her best to push her skill, finishing up as fast as she could before moving on to the next mentally exhausting part of her day. Ever since Sonia had been forced to drink those potions, The amount her aunt had been able to do at the clinic had skyrocketed with her increased mana, meaning that between the two of them, things had gotten significantly easier for the clinic as a whole. Because of that, she didn't need to go in as much as she'd originally been expecting to once she got back. And the days she did, she was able to handle almost everything quickly so long as it was something she knew how to treat. She had the technical skill now, but there were still holes in her knowledge that occasionally meant she needed the guidance of others. Still, all of the town healers had gotten significantly more free time as a result, meaning she had the leeway to wait at the guild to go out hunting again with Aso, even if the atmosphere made her regret not meeting the girl somewhere else. Of all the other adventurers around, not many would meet her eyes, the majority of them looking away or else leaving the building altogether when she showed up. It was different from how things had used to be, back when her magic was so much worse and whatever fear she received was mixed with hate. She'd been steadily improving her image in town ever since then with the work she did. But now it seemed there was more fear of her than ever, only for a completely different reason. Everyone was aware of her current rank. When she had first understood what was happening, she couldn't deny that she'd enjoyed it a bit, though she expected it to fade sooner than it had. There were plenty among the adventurers in town who had either treated her antagonistically in the past or else been silent as others had, and the fact that it was widely known that she had 2 awakened skills had left those same adventurers shaken. It was already known that she had a ridiculous amount of mana, but now that the fact that she had a ridiculous amount of skill to go with it had been revealed, every one of them was walking on eggshells around her, fearing some retribution that she had no intention of dishing out. Still, it didn't hurt the way it might have in the past for the simple fact that she wasn't alone anymore. She had her family like she always did, but she was getting along well with her coworkers at the clinic. She'd been starting to exchange letters with Steph, Amy, and Yuzu. She had a friend in Aso and even arguably Sakhel, and she had Ben. Even if others wanted to fear her, it was fine. She would just keep living her life. "Sorry? Did you wait long?" Aso called out as she ran up to her. "No, let's start heading out," Thera told her, smiling brightly. "We've got to make a great adventurer out of you yet." Despite what she'd initially expected, Aso hadn't joined up with anyone else to form a party yet. She was starting to mingle with others at the guild, but unlike Thera, her work at the clinic was coming first for the time being, meaning it would be inconvenient for anyone she joined to have to work around her schedule. Because of that, when Thera couldn't go with her, she was doing safer quests by herself, only venturing deeper into the woods when she wasn't alone to get whatever practice she could. Of course, there were issues with that as well. Thera was no teacher. She didn't know how to guide Aso to greater heights, especially since they didn't share any magics. Instead, their time together out in the woods was more geared towards Aso figuring out what worked best for herself, as Thera worked to ensure the other girl didn't fall into any danger she couldn't deal with while offering what few pointers she could. It might not have been the most efficient way of doing things, but they both felt like it worked for them, and it gave them each some company in their practice as they went. As they walked, every now and then Thera would stop to touch one of the trees they passed, working to practice both of her awakened skills by using the same spell that had pushed them over that edge to begin with, though in a completely different way than she had the first time. When she cast her petrification, she was trying to be so much more selective of it than she had been before, and luckily for the forest, she was succeeding. Instead of each tree she touched turning to stone, it was only a few leaves and branches changing as she pushed the limits of her control. It still wasn't the fastest, and she doubted she'd be able to use it from too much of a distance, at least without the risk of getting other things caught up in the effect as well, but being able to see her improvement so clearly was thrilling in ways she found hard to properly express. And it wasn't just that spell she was getting comfortable using. As Aso began searching the area for the herbs that her quest required, Thera activated another to be on the safe side. Earth Healing. A spell that imbued a given area with a basic life spell that would improve the healing rate of anything in it for a length of time varying depending on how much mana went into it. Ordinarily, it was far from effective, with the spell really only having any worth to the few people in the world that had either an awakened earth or life magic. But by having both along with her huge mana pool, Thera could cast the spell over a field and have it run for over an hour with relative ease. It was something she'd started practicing when she'd begun hunting with Aso as an extra precaution for the girl's safety. And with all of that done, she let herself relax just a little. Let's see, so what should I do to pass the time now? She wondered, not sure how she should be training her magics. Working on improving her control was always a big thing, but the question usually came down to how. A question that was answered by a feeling above her, compelling her to look up just as a stone ape threw itself from a treetop, aiming for exactly where she would have been if she hadn't detected it and moved. To its poor luck, though, she had sensed it, and in seconds it wasn't just a creature with a stone skin, but solid stone as it was petrified. When she figured out what the skill was for after gaining it from awakening her earth magic, Thera had to admit that she wasn't impressed. It gave her a natural understanding of where stone and earth was around her, but the answer was usually a simple down. That quick exchange, however, had managed to show her that there was some utility to the skill that she hadn't been seeing. As Aso ran up to her to check if everything was all right, Thera waved her off, telling her to get back to her quest as she looked at what was now a statue in front of her. Undoing petrification was supposedly significantly harder than it was to petrify something in the first place, something she was sure to fail at, but that didn't mean it wouldn't make for some good practice in the meantime. "I'm having naps, it's fine. Besides, I told you I would when I had time. I clearly don't right now." He had a positively outrageous amount of work to do at the moment with all of the orders he'd been receiving in the last week. Although he'd taken most of them on the first day, with only about half of the visitors kicked out of the shop, the ones he had been able to come to an agreement with had been wanting a lot, to the point that he'd have been busy for months if he was working alone. On the plus side, his teacher had decided to be merciful to him, handling some of the smithing work for a few of the items since what most people wanted was the complex enchantments he could make. But to finish up as quickly as possible, he still had to work late into the nights and early in the mornings, while also going out to Analia again with Thera to buy more raw supplies. All in all, it was a lot, and exhausting too. But pushing myself is good for my skills, so this is fine. It might be just what the doctor ordered for finally awakening my connect. If that happens, you'll just need to call me some help. Break some rules to keep me alive, and I'll make it up to you later. Relax, things are finally slowing down. If I push myself to get all of this done in just a few weeks, then I should be able to keep up with the order load in a regular workday. Showing a willingness to kick anyone out on the first day had gone far in ensuring that he wouldn't have to deal with anything too annoying, and it seemed that there were even people who'd simply left upon finding out he had no intention of working for anyone. Even if he was working himself hard for the orders he had taken, the number of them coming in now matched what he was sure he could do in a day. He just needed to get the pile that had come in the first 2 days over and done with. With that frame of mind, Ben picked up a handful of mana discs, enchanting them 2 at a time before putting them to the side to be put into different handles after. He really hadn't been expecting the item he'd made for Amy to be so popular, but requests for similar ones made up almost a quarter of his new orders, though for far fewer weapons than hers had, most of them wanting only 2 to 4 options, and almost always one was a shield. Still, each one needed to be slightly different to work with the skills of the person who would be using it, so it was excellent practice for him overall, a fact that was reflected on his card as his job level kept going up. He was already dreaming about what option he'd take next, as well as wondering what new options would come for the enchanting branch. No. When Falk came in for the morning, he found Ben where he'd left him the night before, standing over his forge as he worked. "Damn it, boy. Did you not sleep at all? Since you being here means it's morning, no? My bad. All right, I'm kicking you out when we close up today. Go home and get some proper rest. Thera and Sonia are going to worry. I did let them know I was going to have a lot of work for a while. And that doesn't mean they won't worry." Okay, fine," Ben relented, having to admit that he was feeling pretty tired at the end of it all. "So how's it look out there? Nobody camped outside today, so I would say it's a win. Who knows, maybe we'll get lucky, and you will be able to just focus on your work." That feels like a bit much to hope for, but fingers crossed. Their brief exchange done, Falk got started as well, working on the elements of Ben's orders he could help with to cut down on his apprentice's work. Only stopping whenever someone from town came in to make a purchase or someone from outside of it came in to either make an order or get kicked out for saying something stupid. And it was like that the day flew by. It was as it came to an end and Falk had Ben by the scruff of his neck, ready to make sure that his apprentice actually went home whether the boy liked it or not, that they heard the sound of the door opening one final time, finding a one-armed man standing there. It was hard to say if the state he was in looked good or not. While his body was rippling with muscle and seemed undeniably powerful, His general appearance was overall more sickly. Even ignoring the fact that his arm ended just below the shoulder, there was no escaping the gaunt flesh, pale skin, and almost dead-looking eyes that locked onto the two of them as they looked back. "We're about to close for the night, but if you make it quick we can get you sorted," Fox said, putting Ben down as he did. I'm not sure it will be quick, to be honest," the strange man told them. "Would one of you two be the Apostle of Myriad?" Ben grimaced as he heard it, still not used to people being able to connect him to that title so easily, but gave an affirmative. "That's me. What can I do for you, Mr. Kelf? My God told me to find you. Something about a deal to have an item made that you agreed to?" Just 1 second. Myriad. He didn't remember making any deals like that, but his God was happy to remind him. "Right. Okay. Sorry about that. I thought I would get some heads up from Myriad before anyone came to collect," Ben told the man brightly. "So what am I making you?" From the look of him, Ben pegged the man as some sort of warrior in need of a weapon for things to come, but it seemed he was only half right as the man bowed to him. "I understand this is an unreasonable request, but I've been told that if there's anyone who might help, it's you. Please, so I might wield a sword again. Make me a new arm." "Wait, what?" "From what I understand, you're able to enchant unlike any other in the world. I know this is a lot to ask, but if you would at least try to make me one, I'd be forever grateful." "All right, ignoring the fact that I wouldn't even know where to begin with something like that, I'm going to ask the obvious question of why you can't get an awakened healer to help you. If your God was willing to spend the item I owe them for this, you must be worth getting some proper treatment as well." It wasn't like there weren't options after all. Even ignoring how powerful the great light and life spirits were, someone who had been an awakened life magic user for long enough should have had what it took to help restore a lost limb with enough time. Considering the fact that Ben was getting to the point that many of his items were making it to ultra-rare, if this man was worth it, then he should have been worth whatever expenses would come from hiring a powerful healer. Hearing that though, Kelf only shook his head. "Unfortunately, my race keeps that from being an option. Mind if I ask why? I'm a ghoul. My kind are thoroughly in the death affinity with an unnaturally strong resistance to life, so there's no mage who can heal me with their magics. I understand I'm asking a lot, but before I lost my arm I was a swordmaster. With only months to go, I'll do whatever I can to fight again." Swordmaster. So an awakened swordsman, huh? He could see why Kelf's God would be spending an item on that. Awakened skill holders were considered valuable enough that the gods even reached across realities to get more. If Ben could make him something that would let him use half of his original power, then of course it would be worth the effort, but that still didn't mean there weren't better options. Okay, so if life magic's a no-go, then what about light? I get that its healing aspects aren't as good, but I'm acquainted with a powerful one, and I personally wouldn't mind trying to get them to help you instead of making an item. Of course, if I ask Lux for help, I'm sure I'll need to do something for her or end up owing Pelenia even more, but it seems like a worthwhile trade. Despite his willingness to put up with owing a different person a favor though, Kelf again denied him. Even worse, life magic may not work on me, but light actively causes me harm. I'm pretty certain Light Mage, who has the strength to heal a person with an injury like mine, would leave me a pile of ash instead. Seriously. The evolutionary history of my race has left us ill-suited for traditional forms of healing, he sighed. So seeing as that's the case, will you help me? Well, it's the deal I made, so I'll at least do my best. Myriad, why the hell can't ghouls be healed normally? I can't believe there's an entire species less suited for living in this world than me. The fact he had to figure out how to make an arm wasn't an issue. In fact, he viewed it mostly as an interesting project that had the potential to help him with some other goals as he went, but that didn't mean he wasn't going to complain at all. The life of their homeworld evolved around an anomaly. It's unfortunate, but it's affected their kind's path as a whole. Good luck, though. I believe in you. No, not good luck, though. What does any of that even mean? For some reason, the star their world orbited would spew out death mana. Given that life was able to grow and develop despite that, I'd say a few quirks are forgivable. Okay, whatever, this is just the reality I live in, I guess. So how am I going to deal with this? He was being asked to do more than just make a simple prosthetic, He needed to make something at least mostly functional. Something that would be able to deal with whatever level of strength was put into it for combat while ideally being able to manage the smaller, more minute tasks one would expect of them in day-to-day life. I don't think you need to go that far, his god pointed out. The man asked for help to use a weapon. How well he can use cutlery seems irrelevant. If I'm making the guy an arm, then I'm making him a good arm, even if it might take a while. But how am I even going about it? Dang it, do I need to start learning about biology now? Like, I can probably just imitate some of the structure, but I still want to make it as good as I can, so I really might need to learn it on a deeper level, and that still isn't considering the structure of the enchantments I'll need to make, which really is a whole other issue. I mean, I'm sure I'll be able to do something, but the question is how complicated is it going to have to be, and how will it be powered? Since I can already make some that can interact with a person's mind, that's not an issue, but this really is going to take a while. He took a break from his rambling to look at his god. Myriad, want to do me a favor and make me an arm up here I can dissect? I want to freshen up on the structural bits. He had plenty of experience dismantling creatures for parts, but most of them weren't very close to the standard hominid body plan like he'd need to make the arm, and any time he'd taken a corpse apart he hadn't been concerned about how the various pieces worked together. Something Myriad couldn't help him with either. If you'll remember, my kind are radically different from yours, and I don't just know the deeper body structure of different races for no reason. Ugh, damn it. Would Hellori be able to help? I get her people are starfish, but with the whole knowledge god thing you'd think she might have picked up a bit here or there. What? Her people aren't starfish-like at all. They're definitely hominid types. What? But I've met Zyzel. Gods can have other species representing them. Case in point, me and you. Fair. In that case, bring her on over. Gotta use my teacher for all she's worth. Half-heartedly stirring a pan full of breakfast, Ben was in a daze trying to go through everything he and Hellori had gone over the night before, trying to think about how he would possibly apply it to an item, especially something like a prosthetic. It was simply too outside of what he was used to, and he felt like he was frying his mind trying to make the idea work out. It was as these thoughts filled his head that arms wrapped around his chest from behind him as he failed to notice anyone approach. Every bit of him too occupied to notice his surroundings as Thera spoke up. Nice to finally have you back home, Sleepy. We were getting worried. Ah, sorry about that, Thera. Work was a little too busy, and now on top of all of the other orders. I was given a bit of a crazy project to work on too. It might take a while to finish, and I definitely should have declined more of the other ones that were coming in. Hearing his voice, she turned him around to look him in the eyes. Wow, you look worse than I thought you would. Ouch. You know what I mean. As your primary healer, I recommend taking the day off and going back to bed. You look like you need it. She held his face as she looked at him while Ben took her hands. I think I will once I finish this new project. I need to meet up with the client today, but I'm not sure if it's going to go farther than just a meeting to discuss it more while I figure out how to build an arm. I'm sorry, build a what? A prosthetic arm. I spent most of the night studying the structural aspects with Hellori, but applying it to my crafting is a whole other matter, so it might take a while. But it could potentially be useful for what I'm trying to do for Inix, so I really should put my all into it. Actually, as my primary healer, do you have any suggestions? Yeah. Just let me handle it, obviously, she told him. I may not have done it before, but I'm almost certain I can make someone regrow a severed limb. Worst to worst, it will be good practice. Doesn't sound like it's in the cards, sadly. I guess his species isn't super susceptible to healing magics. Although not many healers can claim to have her raw power, so maybe it would be worth a try. As he was thinking about it, she spoke back up. I could still give it a go, but if that fails, my next instinct would probably be to graft one on from something else. Though I guess if life magic is an issue, then that wouldn't work great either, would it? Probably not, he said sadly, before feeling an idea come into place. But maybe I could do something close? Standing in the middle of the training grounds, Thera wore an intense look of concentration on her face as she held the stump of Kelf's arm, pouring untold thousands of mana out into the world to an extent that Ben could feel it standing off to the side as grass, weeds, and flowers in the area all took in what wasn't being forced into the ghoul's body, growing before his eyes before she eventually gave up. I can't believe I'm meeting someone with a worse body for healing than Ben, she muttered in defeat. I probably could have treated 100 lost limbs for what I just spent. For what it's worth, I'm more than satisfied with how this turned out, Kelf told her happily as he stretched. When he'd been told there was an awakened healer in town who wanted to make an attempt, he'd gone along with it, having no expectation that it would be any more than a waste of time. But to his surprise, there was a change. It wasn't to the extent of growing a new arm, but many an old injury managed to heal from all of the life mana pouring into him. Aches he'd dealt with for years gone in minutes. I'll have to stop by this town again if I'm ever hurt. While Thera looked annoyed that the life magic she'd worked so hard on was regulated to being nothing more than a means of healing minor wounds to the man, Ben spoke up. All right, I'm going to be honest, Kelf. It's probably going to take a while before I have anything I'm satisfied with giving you. How long can you be in town for? I have nowhere else I need to be. Cool, in that case, if you want to go relax or something, me and Thera are going to go for a hunt to see if that helps at all. I could meet up with you in a couple days at the shop to talk about my progress if that sounds good. He'd expected to part at that, but hearing the word hunt, Kelf perked up. Could I perhaps join you? Sure, I have no problem with it, but won't you be bored? Nonsense. No better way to feel alive, and it's been a while since I've enjoyed one. I'd love to see what the area has to offer. All right, in that case, let's head out. They moved through the woods without much concern, their goal being to find a specific species to examine, at least to begin with, one that was still reasonably new to the area but had already proven to be a problem for the town's many adventurers, the stone ape. A creature that Thera was uniquely suited to finding as they went, pushing her earth sense to the trees above them, waiting to feel something move and capturing it in a net of stone as soon as she did, bringing it to the ground for Ben to get his hands on. All right, great. A little test for thee and a little test for me, he muttered as he reached down to the restrained animal and connected to it. It felt similar to when he'd connected to an obel, lacking the defined skill structure that the system helped to provide, instead having a sense of vagueness to it. He couldn't tell what anything on its soul was the way he could with a person, but that didn't matter to him in the slightest. All that was important was that he could mentally reach out and touch it. Watch carefully, world, 'cause I'm about to do something very cool that absolutely deserves to make my connect awaken. With that determination firmly in place, he grabbed tight onto the vague feeling he was picking up on with his connect and joined it with his divine enchanting, using the skills to etch whatever ability it was onto a ring. It wasn't easy. It felt akin to when he first discovered he could use the skill to enchant with the skills of others. But in the end it worked perfectly as Ben grinned down at the new ring, clearly labeled as Stone Ape's Earth Magic, under his enchanting's limited analysis, with his smile only slipping from his face as the moments passed. Why exactly am I not getting a system notification telling me what a good job I did for awakening my connect? He had been so sure it would work, but with no system notification to show for it, he slipped the ring into his pocket as he stepped aside for Thera to finish the creature off now that he'd failed, as she used her earth magic to kill it cleanly. Impressive, Kelf muttered. Makes me wish I could learn more than death and dark magic. So what was the point of getting this? Aside from my little failure, study? Ben told him, pumping the creature's chest to get more blood out. If I'm making an arm, I need some idea on how they're supposed to work. I did get a bit of help on that last night, but I need more. Hence this. Once he was sure he had the corpse as drained as he could get it, he took out a sharp knife, taking the creature apart as he always would, but far slower than usual, trying to understand how it all worked together, what bits did what and how it would affect movement as a whole, while also questioning how it might be improved upon compared to what nature could come up with. Do you need to be looking at the entire beast then? Kelf asked after a while, seeing Ben wasn't just examining the arm, but every inch of the stone ape as he went. Honestly, probably not, at least for making you an arm. But it doesn't hurt either, and it's something I'll need to do eventually for a different project anyway. Might as well do it all at once. He devoted all of his minds to going over how all of the bones, muscles, and tendons worked together, building the creature into a comprehensive whole, but it didn't take long for him to finish, looking at the two with him as he did. All right, that was probably the most useful one, but let's see what else we can find today too. Who knows? Maybe some inspiration will strike depending on what I see. After breaking down dozens of other creatures as the hours passed, Ben had to admit that he didn't get too much more from it than he had with the first stone ape. That wasn't to say it was pointless, just that it wouldn't immediately help him with the current goal of making an artificial arm. So with that he went back to the shop, ready to do some testing. The first of which had nothing to do with creating a functioning prosthetic. Ben wanted to see what could be done with a stone ape's earth magic and knew he could grasp the basics with only a few minutes of work, so he did a few simple enchantments with it to compare against a standard earth magic enchantment, as well as trying to blend the two together, finding both options to be worse in every way than what could be achieved with just plain earth magic. Not only was it disappointing, it also gave him no reason to ever pursue that line of enchanting again. In theory, it might be worthwhile if he ever got the chance to gain a skill from a creature that could use it more skillfully than any sapient mortal, but he doubted that would ever occur, so he completely switched his mental gears to focus on just how he'd be making Kelf's prosthetic. Structurally, it wasn't too hard, just a lot of moving parts to create. To mimic the way muscles would expand and contract, he had to create metal levers that would interlock with one another, sliding into each other to replicate the action, while he had to create artificial tendons through his alchemy, modify the recipe he already used for his bike tires to create the properties he'd need, using both his material user and destruction skills to help with shaping before he moved on to the enchantments, letting it move by linking to the user's mind. It was only once all of that was done that he took it to Kelf, fitting it to the man's body as the ghoul looked on dubiously. "Are you sure I'll be able to fight with this?" he asked, not wanting to sound rude, but not feeling exceptionally impressed with what Ben had made. "This? Absolutely not. I already said this is a prototype. I want to make sure I'm on the right track before I go all in on a design, so to do that I need you to work with me a bit to make you the best item I can. For now, just run some mana through it and try to make it work to your will. You'll probably have to think about what you want it to do for now, but as you get used to it, it will hopefully become something you can handle without thought. Of course, if that never ends up happening, then you can always aim to get the parallel thought skill to make things easier on yourself, but I wouldn't worry about it for now. Instead, just give it a try." Kelf stared at his arm intensely as Ben did the same, and before both of their eyes it responded to the swordsman's will, lifting up as the fingers on it curled and uncurled in response to what he wanted. To Kelf, the experience was moving. It had been a long time since he'd lost his arm, and while he had thought he'd moved past it, just that extra bit of mobility and dexterity was enough to improve his quality of life greatly, even if it wasn't enough to let him wield a sword to anything near his full potential. To Ben, though, it was a chance to see where he might improve. He hadn't put any sort of covering over the pieces to protect them so that he could see how the item would move once it was being worn, and he could immediately see how it might be made to a better quality while he tried to line up those improvements to future ideas for his design, taking mental notes as he led Kelf through a series of movements to see how it would perform before sending him on his way with the prosthetic, letting him get used to the feel of moving it with his mana. It wouldn't be able to see constant use, at least in that model, but for the advanced one that would eventually contain a mana crystal to take off some of the user's load, powering it wouldn't be a problem. And all that's left is to figure out just how I'm going to improve the design, he thought to himself as he got to work on other orders. He couldn't ignore what had already come in for him, but he wasn't going to stop thinking on how to get the most out of such an interesting project as ideas and theories rushed through his head. As days passed while Ben worked on his project, eventually Falk left, off for whatever work he had to fulfill for the Craftsman's Guild, and leaving the shop closed down for orders. That didn't stop anyone from trying, of course, but Ben was sick enough with what he had. He didn't want to take more when his teacher wasn't around to help reduce his load. He was tuning out the sounds of knocking coming from outside as he experimented, making the thinnest metal wires he could with his material user skill along with metal sheaths they could slide against in order to mimic the way muscles would expand and contract far beyond what had been done for the prototype. It involved pushing his magic skill to the limits as he not only tried to use it to get the sizes and shapes perfect, but also experimented to create the ideal ratios of metals and other materials that would give the artificial muscle fibers the exact properties he was looking for as he created piles of them, more than he would realistically need but enough to be able to fail a few times as he went and tried to create something that would help him reach his goal of creating a fully functional prosthetic. "Oh, I love job bonuses so much," he muttered. "I'm sorry I was ever not grateful enough for quests that granted levels to them. The effects on his skill and attribute growth since he'd managed to complete so many was becoming more and more apparent. And the joy he felt when his magic would level up was a huge motivator, especially considering the part it was playing for his work. It was enough to make him reconsider the job he planned on taking after he finished up with Master Enchanter. But he pushed the thought away to focus on what was next. With all of the wires complete, he got to work cutting them to the lengths he would need, using his destruction skill to do it as a way of training it as well while he organized them all and applied a reasonably complex enchantment to each and every one, using a level of skill on each individual wire that would have destroyed them back when he'd first been starting out. It was a long, time-consuming process, but it felt like only an instant for him as he got absorbed in the task and was able to move on to the next bit, organizing each wire together to act as an artificial muscle. Comparatively, that was much, much quicker, and once it was finished he let himself move on to the rest of it. He'd taken measurements of Kelf's remaining arm early on, doing his best to use those for constructing the bits the muscles would be clinging to, namely the bones. Those had been an interesting problem in themselves, needing to be both strong and light, able to take a hit without shattering but not bending like metal. But as with the rest of the parts of that particular project, the result was achieved through a combination of research, experimentation, and many sleepless nights to get it right. Once those parts were combined and one of the simpler aspects, the artificial tendons, had been incorporated, that left the final bit to add: the skin. He hadn't expected it going into the project, but that managed to be the hardest to decide on by far. It was the aspect that would be protecting the internal workings of the arm, but there were a lot of different ways to manage it. Originally, he'd planned on just a strong metal exterior but decided against it for the same reason he had for putting so much care into the bones. If he made something that would dent, it could affect the arm as a whole. He needed something better. For that it came down to experimenting with making more composite materials, blending things that normally wouldn't blend with his material magic to create things from metals, bones, skins, and woods that couldn't exist otherwise, at least not without someone who had the same rare skill, as he ultimately ended up creating something that was a complex blend of things but nearly 50% orichalcum. He couldn't deny it hurt to use so much of such a precious metal, especially when he wouldn't be getting paid for it. But this was to pay off a favor he'd requested. He fully intended to put his all into it. Having the material, though, it then came to making it work structurally, manipulating the substance to take the shape of long thin strings before he began to cut and braid them, using his mana to merge the braids so that it would be one piece but still of a far greater strength overall. Once done, he shaped each piece to fit over the external parts of the arm, connecting everything that still needed to be joined, added a rainbow mana crystal to the interior and finished the last of all of the enchantments, leaving it finally complete in the end, perfect as far as his eyes could see. "Oh, I am so freaking good at everything I do," he muttered to himself, thrilled with the notification like he was any time he finished a job. He'd known it was going to be coming soon given just how many of the items he'd been making for his various orders were making it to lower ultra-rare, a task that was a bit easier than it should have been given how many of them wanted weapons similar to Amy's, and upon succeeding in making the arm, an item he could see had made it to the middle of that ranking, it wasn't shocking that it had paid off in experience. Even better was what that meant for him. When he'd first started learning from Falk, he'd been told that a person who could regularly make items that were classified as ultra-rare only happened once every century or so, usually needing to be around the 5th level of their awakened skill to pull it off. But Ben was getting there at his early level. He still wasn't at the point where he could guarantee he'd get to that rank if he tried, but it was happening more and more as he practiced, meaning that he'd still be having a relatively easier time with jobs, and with that happy thought he reached into his pocket and touched his job crystal, grinning at the pile of new options. Available jobs: Trap User, Craftsman Alchemy Path, Craftsman Artistic Path, Craftsman Blacksmith Path, Craftsman Cooking Path, Craftsman Stonecrafts Path, Craftsman Sewing Path, Holy Craftsman, a Mathematician, Cursed Item Maker, Scholar, a Material Mage,
Destruction Mage,
a High Tank, Otherworldly Craftsman, Infernal Craftsman, Destructive Craftsman, a Master Adventurer, a Soul-Defiling Gardener, a Summoned Enchanter, Ritual Enchanter, Connected Enchanter, Divine Enchanter, Profane Enchanter. It was almost too much to take in. He'd already seen the options for otherworldly, infernal, and destructive craftsman when he completed the master branch of the job, but now there were 7 new ones on top of it, making his mouth water as he looked at it all. He didn't care much about the master adventurer job unless he saw a way to take advantage of it like he had the first adventurer job, but what was immediately below it pulled his interest like nothing else. Soul-defiling gardener. It wasn't hard to imagine why he'd gained that one in particular given how he was patiently waiting for the trees he'd forced foreign souls into to bear their fruit, and he was willing to bet money that was a job nobody but him had gained before, maybe one nobody would again. For that reason alone it was tempting to roll the dice to see what stats would be buffed and what skills would grow from it, not to mention what jobs might come after, but he resisted, instead mentally scrolling down the list more as he felt his eyes stop. 2 words, but they instantly meant so much to him. Connected Enchanter. He'd had jobs in the past that he knew added some bonuses to Connect and jobs he suspected had, but none so clear as to have it in the name. He'd already thought he knew what would be tempting him away from the choice he was going to make, but that made the other options look like garbage in comparison. A job beyond the master branch that would grant him significant bonuses to Connect as well. It was more than he could have dreamed of for finally awakening the skill, but he still held off. If he was right, then the next one would be another quick job he could afford to wait. Once he went over the last 2, he tried to firm up his resolve as he planned for what he would try to take in the future so long as no more tantalizing choices showed up for him. He'd take what he'd originally wanted, hopefully finish it and take Connected Enchanter in no more than 2 weeks, and then alternate between the next 2 that were drawing him in Infernal Craftsman and Profane Enchanter. From the names alone, it wasn't hard to guess what skills they would be associated with, and he wanted more bonuses to that particular skill as soon as he could get them. He doubted that either would be enough to push King of Sacrilege to whatever it would become at the 3rd tier, but it would be more bonuses around in the event he ever got to do anything that could help him along again. Of course, Myriad doesn't need to know anything like that, that'll just stress him out. Instead, let's do this and hope it gives me the skill I really want, 'cause I'm taking Scholar. Name: Ben Hef. Race: human. Titles: Apostle of Myriad, the Forgotten One, Miracle Maker, Skill Learner, Enemy of Aneth, Trial Defier, Trial Breaker, Godslayer, Monster, Madman, God Killer, Threat. Jobs: Scholar, LV 15. Previous jobs: Apprentice Craftsman, Craftsman, Priest, Enchanter, Mind User, Magic Item Maker, Magic Weapon Maker, High Enchanter, Fractured Mind User, Tree Tamer, High Craftsman, Apprentice Mage, True Mage, Tank, Heretic, Adventurer, Divine Heretic, Kin, Master Craftsman, Master Enchanter. Attributes: A Vitality, 653. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 15 per hour.
Mana, 513.
Mana Recovery Rate, 36 per minute. Strength, 532. Agility, 196. Stamina, 1655. Intelligence, 1771. Affinities: Light 3, Life 2, a Fire 4, Water 3, Air 4, Earth 2, Death 3, Dark 1, Space 4, Time 5. Resistances: Light 68, Life 72, Fire 75, Water 69, Air 66, Earth 81, Death 78, Dark 85, Space 63, Time 61. Blessed Skills: Unending Crafting LV2 *, Divine Enchanting LV2 *, Focus LV9. Passive Skills: World Speak Plus, King of Sacrilege LV9 *, Complex Mind LV8, A Bind, Integrated Demonic Body LV4, Defense Enhancement LV4, Parallel Thought LV8, Absorption Resistance LV4, Plant Knowledge LV6, a Mental Expansion LV7, All Affinity Resistance Enhancement LV2, a Material Knowledge LV7, Biology Knowledge LV1, Trap Knowledge LV3, Physics Knowledge LV3, Active Skills: Stealth LV1, Connect LV9, Hidden Mind LV7, Calculate LV4. Meditation LV4. Cycling LV0. Marksmanship LV0. Speed reading LV5. Material user LV6.
Destruction LV5.
Swimming LV1. Blessings. Myriad's blessing. Analia's blessing. Hilori's blessing. Galwax's blessing. Elvit's mana regeneration blessing. Trials. Trial of Analia and Talona. Trial of the dead god. If he could have, Ben would have complained as the notifications went off. What he'd wanted was something along the lines of language knowledge, given how much effort he'd put into studying the topic recently. But he didn't have time to get any such words out. With the notification came pain like none he'd felt before, as each of his minds split once more, ripping his thoughts to shreds, and before he could feel the blood pouring down his face, he mercifully passed out. Slowly Ben began to stir, the overwhelming migraine not giving him much of a choice in the matter as he tried to make sense of what happened, taking stock of his overcrowded mind as he did. New jobs, new skills I don't particularly need or want, new level-ups, Thera being unfortunately right about what would happen at the 8th level of parallel thought from the looks of it. Let's see, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 30? I ended up with 30 minds? It was 2 more than he should have had if his thoughts were just going to split, but he didn't have the leeway to question it. Even thinking was causing him pain, but he needed to work through what had happened the best he could before he committed to opening his eyes. As things stood, every individual strand of thought in his head should have been functioning as an independent mind, able to hyperfocus on a single task if he needed them to, but that wasn't what had happened. If that was the case, then each one should have been significantly weaker individually than a typical human mind as a result, but instead they all felt nearly as good, as if the individual strands had started to fray, each having just a bit of leeway to divide their focus as a result. Whatever was happening in his head as his skills synergized was having unique and violent consequences. But to try and help the pain fade, he forced all but 3 minds to meditate as he let himself relax, ignoring the world around him. Feels like that might be happening a lot from now on, he thought to himself as he accepted reality and opened his eyes. He hadn't noticed at first, but he wasn't lying on the floor of the shop like he should have been, instead being in a well-lit room on a firm bed. The sounds of various people running around and chattering could be heard, with both the noise and the light making his migraine significantly worse, even if he tried to keep the feeling from reaching his face as he spoke to the woman by his side. "Fancy meeting you here," he tried to joke, hoping it didn't come off as pained as he thought it did as Thera grabbed his hand. Worry etched across her expression. She took a breath, trying to compose herself before speaking as she forced on a far calmer look that she wasn't truly feeling. "Ben, what happened? Took a new job, it leveled up my parallel thought, went about as well as the last time my mind split from the looks of it. Really want to meet the person who said that leveling skills can't hurt and lodge a complaint." He tried to joke again, but the serious mood didn't leave Thera as she sighed. "Yeah, that pretty much matches my guess. All right, I'm telling you this as both your healer and your girlfriend. You aren't allowed to take mind jobs anymore." "Hey, don't worry. It's Phi Dash. We find you in a puddle of blood, Ben," she yelled, cutting him off before trying to rein herself in. "Myriad found you and got Analia to get me to help you, and I get you like training your skills, but this is too much. You were unconscious for over a day, even with me spending the entire time healing you, and Analia's been checking in with me and keeping me up to date about things. The fact that this is happening to you is being reported to all of the largest healing organizations on the planet, just because there needs to be a record that in extreme situations things like this are even possible because it's just never happened before. I even leveled up my mana examination trying to understand what sort of strain your brain is currently under, and even while you were asleep it looked like it was pushing beyond its limits. I don't want you to be the first case of a person taking a job and dying from it." By the end she was yelling again, and he listened patiently, squeezing her hand as he did. "All right, you're right," he told her, fully understanding what she was saying. "I won't take any mind-specialized jobs anymore. The problem looks like it's from me leveling up complex mind, parallel thought, and probably mental expansion, so I'll do my best to not use those skills to their full potential anymore too." "Can you really avoid that?" she asked, completely in doubt. "I've seen how you like to work, Ben, and I know how much you like having your thoughts occupied." "True, But with that last level up, I'm sitting at an altogether horrific 30 mines in my head. I'll make sure I use no more than 20 at a time and the rest are on permanent meditation duty. Who knows? Give it a year and I just might awaken the skill, becoming an amazing Zen master. That finally managed to get a small smile out of her. If anyone was going to, it would be you, but fine. Just don't be in such a hurry to train yourself to death. You hear me? She asked him as she leaned in, giving him a kiss as the worry that came with him not waking up started to fade. Loud and clear. Good. Cecily has gone and kicked everyone who wanted to take orders from you out of town, saying you had to be hospitalized from overwork, so things should be a bit quieter for you for a while at least, and you'll be staying here for the rest of the day as we keep an eye on you. A few other healers will be through to do what they can. But in the meantime, is there anything I can do for you? Well, if I'm going to be here a while, would you mind grabbing me every book the clinic has to spare? He asked innocently as Thera looked like she was getting ready to start lecturing him again. I'm not going to go too hard at it, I promise. But my speed reading also leveled up, and even using 20 minds I'll be going through books super fast. Plus, for some reason I got the biology knowledge skill when I took the scholar job, so gaining some levels to it will help me finish and move on to a different one nice and easy. Fine. But I want you to know you're ridiculous. You wouldn't have me any other way. You're an awful, stressful bastard of an apostle. You know that? Come on, Myriad. No need to yell, I still have a migraine. Yeah. Well, do you know how much of a headache you are to me all of the time? How do you think I felt when I finished up with Hellori and found you almost drowning in your own blood? Huh? Honestly, the system interacts with you the same it does with anyone else. How do you keep finding new and horrific aspects of it? You're the first person that's experienced true harm by being connected to it, which I want to point out is exceptionally not my fault. Ugh. I know it's not, but I still need to vent a bit. Your girlfriend is completely right, by the way. No more mind jobs and avoid leveling your core mind skills. In that case, does connect count as a mind skill or an enchanting skill or a soul skill? Cause it seems to interact with all of them to an extent, and I got a connect themed job through the enchanter path that I really want to take. What's it called? Connected enchanter. Quietly, Myriad debated with himself before answering. I would assume it's probably fine, since it should mainly be an enchanter job that has a focus on the connect skill specifically instead of other mind skills. But I fully expect you to discuss this with Thera first to get her input. Also, even if she agrees to it, I want you taking it with both her and preferably Sonia around too in case anything goes wrong. Even just feeling your mind from the outside, Ben, what's happening isn't natural. Didn't you and Hellori tell me before that my skills would just start interacting with my soul at a deeper level? 'Cause of that though? Sure. But it looks like your soul must be having trouble keeping up. Honestly, what's going on in your head is too much right now. Not the most desirable of things to hear. Ben just nodded with his eyes partially shut, trying to block out the light of his god's realm. All right. Well, I'll do what you said and talk about it with her in a few days when I finish my job. In the meantime, when you showed me your blueprints in the past, you made a huge book for me to read through, right? Would you mind just doing something like that again with whatever you know that's educational, and then I'll just spend my time reading up here quietly? I believe you still need to properly sleep as we'd agreed. What are you talking about? I was asleep for an entire day. Being unconscious doesn't count. Ha, it's fine. I honestly feel pretty well rested after all of that. Minus the headache. So I just want to finish up this job as quickly as possible. Ugh. Fine. The cube gave in, creating a mountain of books around Ben to read through. Honestly, I'm gonna have to talk to one of the mind gods about you. Maybe one of them could do something. You're the best. Their conversation done, Ben opened the first book he could grab, not caring about the topic as he started to read, enjoying the peace and quiet that was around him as he tried to keep his inner world as silent. I really thought I'd have more time to figure out how to broach this topic. Ben thought as he put his all into making the best breakfast he could for Sonia and Thera. His headache only growing worse with the knowledge that things likely wouldn't go super smoothly for the conversation to come. Who would have thought my reading speed would increase so much? His god sighed. Teehee? They continued to talk while he cooked, Thera and Sonia eventually coming in, with his girlfriend going up to him instead of taking a seat as she grabbed his face, running a myriad of healing spells through him before using her mana examination on him to view the strain his body was under. Your brain isn't as bad as it was yesterday, but I'd still be horrified if someone walked into the clinic like this, she muttered. I'm going to keep an eye on you, of course. But if you can, I'd say you should probably force even more of your minds to meditate if you don't need them. Okay, that's fair. But for now, don't worry. Just take a seat and eat. She didn't look convinced but did as he asked, digging in with gusto after the first bite as Sonia spoke up while she ate. Did your crafting level up again? Oh yeah, a few different skills did that I should probably update you all on. How did you know? Ha! I can taste the difference. Glad to see there's a noticeable change in quality. From there he spoke about the other changes to his status and chatted about the day to come as he watched them eat, waiting for them to finish before he hesitantly brought up the topic he knew might cause some concern. So, I finished my job. Sonia looked like she was ready to spit out her last bite as a fork fell from Thera's hands. Ben, it's been a day. Ha, yeah, but it was a job focused on learning, and even if I held back a third of my minds, well, it's a pretty big change. I read a lot with Myriad last night and it just sort of finished. All right, so what did you take then? Thera asked, looking at him with suspicion. Ahem, nothing yet. I spoke it over with my god, and he was hoping that you'd both stand by for my next one considering how my last went and discuss the option I want with you both first. I was looking at going for an advanced enchanter job called Connected Enchanter. And is that not at least partially a mind job? Thera asked, staring into him as she did while Ben decided that honesty was probably the best policy. We think it will have to do more with the way Connect interacts with enchanting. In that regard, it's really more of an enchanting skill and a soul skill than a mind skill. It's hard to say for sure, but it might get me a lot closer to awakening the skill like I want to. However, if you both are against it, I promise I won't take it. I do have other options. Both women just stared at him silently until Thera let out a tired sigh. Auntie, I don't think I'll be at the clinic today. I need to make sure this idiot doesn't destroy his brain taking this stupid job. I understand. I'll tell Drari, but I'm sure we'll be able to handle things fine. So you guys mean? He started hopefully as Thera shot him an annoyed look. Just take it before I change my mind. Yes, ma'am. All of them waited with bated breaths. But as the seconds ticked by, Thera and Sonia were able to sigh in relief while Ben could only groan in disappointment. Was it really too much to hope that the job would push me over into awakening my skill? Just be grateful you're conscious to complain about it, Thera told him. And whether you like it or not, you're going to be having a very, very relaxed day. All right, sounds good to me. There's just one thing I need to do. I promise it won't put any strain on me or be stressful in any way. All right, what's the plan? Just got an order to fulfill. Are you all right? Kelf asked as soon as he saw Ben. The town was in an uproar yesterday when you were found. Ha! That sounds like a bit too much of an exaggeration, but I'm fine. Don't worry. It's no exaggeration, Ben, Thera told him, seeming exceptionally tired. You're one of the 2 awakened skill holders this town has. It can be considered a point of pride. Of course people would be worried. At the very least, they were the only 2 the town was aware of, with Falk managing to maintain his privacy, even if some held their suspicions given the skill of his apprentice. Well then, it's good to be loved. Anyway, let's head in and make sure the arm worked out. They went into the shop and Ben made a mental note to clean up the now dried puddle of blood he was seeing as the other 2 deliberately ignored it in favor of what was waiting on the table, the now complete arm for Kelf. The swordsman had been growing used to the prototype Ben had left him to practice with, but with a superior product available, Ben helped him take it off and place the new one on, watching the man move it around, bending and flexing it while he'd open and close its artificial fingers, trying to get a sense of it. It feels good, the ghoul told him, a wide smile on his face. It moves more naturally than the last one and the mana cost is basically nothing. Hell, it is nothing compared to going without an arm again. Most of the cost is being paid with a rainbow mana crystal built into it. All you're spending is to manipulate the enchantments on it. What do you think? Instead of answering, Kelf looked around. Would you mind if I borrowed a sword? Go for it. Walking to the side, He grabbed a long one meant to be wielded with 2 hands as he stood in the middle of the store. He started with some light swings in front of him, feeling how his arm moved with the blade, eventually transitioning to stabs and slashes, following a footwork Ben didn't have the training to understand but wove together into a single movement as Kelf eventually stopped and nodded. It's better than I ever could have hoped. I don't know how to thank you. No need to. This was all a transaction, so if your god asks, just make sure they know you're pleased with the work. Of course. But even still, I'll never forget this. Well, if it ever needs some maintenance, stop on by. With only a few more words between them, Kelf left, needing to return to his homeland to train and share the good news that he'd be able to fight once again, leaving Ben and Thera to themselves as he left. All right, and now you're officially relaxing, Thera told him firmly, the only task he needed to worry about officially out of the way and complete. Absolutely, we should stop by the clinic so I can broach an idea with Sonia actually. I need to know what sort of enchantments she would want on her home, and that should be a nice way to kill a day. He trailed off as he saw the look in Thera's eyes and quickly changed direction. Or we could go out for a romantic lunch. Maybe relax at home with some games under some dim light to help with my headache and dancing after? That sounds lovely.